The deaf child was ignored at the birthday party until a street musician invited her. Emily Johnson watched the other children running around the party while she remained motionless in the farthest corner of the hall. At 8 years old, she had already learned that being different meant always being alone. Even amidst the crowd of laughter and happy shouts, she couldn't hear. It was then that Amanda Wilson, the birthday girl's mother, approached the musician who had just arrived late. "You must be the replacement for Clown Bubbles," she said, looking suspiciously at the young man's guitar. "I hope you're better at entertaining children than the last one." Michael Thompson nodded, adjusting the brown beret on his dark hair. At 25, he had taken this last-minute job because he needed the money. What he didn't expect was to encounter such an awkward situation within the first few minutes. "Why is that girl all alone?" he asked, discreetly pointing towards Emily. Amanda sighed impatiently. "She's Dr. Robert Johnson's daughter, our neighbor. The girl is deaf, there's no use trying to include her. The other children don't know how to handle it, so it's best to just leave her quietly in her little corner." Michael felt a tightness in his chest. He knew that feeling of exclusion well. His younger brother Nathan was also deaf, and throughout his childhood he had witnessed similar situations. "Maybe I can try something," he suggested. "Look, I hired you to entertain my daughter's party, not for charity work. Just play your songs and keep the children busy." Amanda walked away to attend to the cake preparations, leaving Michael alone with his thoughts. He observed Emily more closely. The girl wore a light pink dress and had her blonde hair tied in 2 braids. Her blue eyes looked sad, fixed on the floor. The other children were playing musical chairs right in the center of the hall. The loud sound of the music filled the room, along with laughter and happy shouts. Emily lifted her head for a moment, watching the commotion, but soon looked down again. Michael approached slowly, sitting on the floor a few meters away from the girl. He began tuning his guitar, testing the strings. Emily showed no initial reaction. It was then that he had an idea. He put the guitar on the floor and started clapping his hands in a steady rhythm. Nothing too complex, just a simple, repetitive beat. To his surprise, Emily lifted her head and looked directly at him. Michael smiled and continued clapping. This time, Emily paid closer attention, as if trying to understand what he was doing. The musician picked up his guitar again and placed it close to the floor where she was sitting. When he started to play, something magical happened. Emily put her hand on the floor, and her eyes lit up. She could feel the vibrations. "Do you like music?" Michael asked, even though he knew she couldn't hear him. The girl didn't answer, but her shy smile said it all. It was the first time anyone had tried to include her in a musical activity. Michael continued playing, watching Emily's reactions. She began to tap her foot lightly on the floor, following the rhythm she felt through the vibrations. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video, and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, Amanda suddenly appeared beside them with an irritated expression. "I already told you it's no use trying to play for her. The girl can't hear anything." "But she can feel it," Michael replied calmly. "The vibrations of the music reach her through the floor." "That's ridiculous. You're disrupting the other children's party. Go to the center of the hall and do your job properly." Michael looked at Emily, who had lowered her head again. The disappointed look on the girl's face broke his heart. He knew he couldn't just leave her there. "Give me 5 minutes," he asked. "Just 5 minutes to show you something special." Amanda huffed but agreed, crossing her arms as she watched. Michael placed the guitar on Emily's lap. The girl was surprised, looking first at the instrument and then at him. The musician guided her small hands to the strings and began to play a soft melody. The vibrations went straight through Emily's body, and her eyes filled with tears of emotion. For the first time in her life, she was truly hearing music. Not through her ears, but through every cell in her body. "How did you know this would work?" asked a voice behind them. Michael turned and saw a woman of about 60 approaching. It was Margaret Johnson, Emily's grandmother, who had just arrived at the party. "My younger brother is also deaf," explained Michael. "I learned from a young age that there are other ways to feel music." Margaret was moved. For years she had tried to find ways to include her granddaughter in activities that other children considered normal. Sitting down next to Emily, she began making hand signs. "She's asking how you knew she would like to feel the music like this," translated Margaret. Michael smiled at Emily and began making some basic signs he had learned from Nathan. The girl's jaw dropped. Someone was talking to her in her own language. Amanda watched the scene with growing discomfort. Some guests had stopped talking and were paying attention to what was happening in the corner of the hall. "This is past the 5 minutes," she interrupted. "The other children are waiting for the activities." It was then that Olivia, the 8-year-old birthday girl, approached curiously. "Mum, why is that man making strange gestures with his hands?" "It's sign language, honey," Margaret explained gently. "That's how we talk to deaf people." "Does Emily understand these gestures?" "Yes, she does. It's her natural language." Olivia was fascinated. She had always been curious about the girl next door, but her mother had always discouraged her from interacting with Emily. "Can you teach me some signs?" she asked Margaret. Before the grandmother could answer, Amanda interfered. "Olivia, come here. You have other guests to greet." "But I want to learn, Mom." The situation was getting tense. Other parents began to approach, curious about what was happening. Michael realized he needed to act quickly before Emily was excluded again. "What if all the children learned a bit about sensory music?" he suggested. "I can teach them how to feel rhythm through vibration." "This is a children's party, not a special education class," Amanda replied, irritated. "Actually, I think it's a wonderful idea," said a firm voice. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Catherine Davis, the principal of a renowned inclusive school in New York. At 55, she had a respected reputation in the field of education and was the mother of one of the guests. "Social inclusion is something we should teach our children from an early age," Catherine continued. "If my son can learn about different forms of communication, it will only make him a more empathetic person." Amanda looked visibly uncomfortable. Catherine was an influential person, and publicly contradicting her opinion wouldn't be smart. "Well, if it's for educational purposes," she murmured reluctantly. Michael seized the opportunity. He asked all the children to sit on the floor in a circle. Emily sat between Olivia and another boy named Ethan, who had shown interest in getting to know her better. "Let's do an experiment," said Michael, speaking loudly so everyone could hear, but also making signs so Emily could follow along. "Close your eyes and put your hands on the floor." The children obeyed, intrigued. Michael began to play a song on the guitar, producing vibrations that passed through the wooden floor. "What are you feeling?" "I feel a nice shaking in the floor," shouted a 6-year-old boy. "It's like the music is going up through my hand," said a girl. "Now open your eyes and look at Emily," requested Michael. All the children watched Emily, who had a huge smile on her face, gently swaying, following the rhythm she felt through her body. "She is listening to music the same way you are," explained Michael. "Only instead of using her ears, she uses her whole body." The children were amazed by this discovery. They had never thought that someone could hear music differently. "It's like having a superpower," exclaimed Ethan. Olivia looked at Emily with renewed admiration. "Did you always know how to do that?" Emily made some signs, which Margaret translated. She said she loves feeling music, but that nobody ever let her participate before. An awkward silence fell over the group of adults present. Many parents there had, consciously or unconsciously, advised their children to avoid Emily, thinking it would be easier for everyone. Catherine broke the silence. "How about we learn some basic signs? That way we can all talk with Emily." Michael began to teach simple signs: hello, thank you, please, friend. The children absorbed the knowledge with impressive speed, practicing among themselves and trying to communicate with Emily. To everyone's surprise, Emily began to teach some signs too, showing words like happy, party, and music. It was the first time she felt useful and included in a group. Robert Johnson, Emily's father, arrived at the party in the middle of this activity. A 42-year-old cardiologist, he had just come from an emergency surgery and was exhausted. What he saw upon entering the hall left him emotional and confused at the same time. His daughter was at the center of a circle of children, all trying to communicate with her through signs. Emily was laughing and gesturing animatedly, happier than he had seen her in months. "What's happening here?" he asked his mother. Margaret held her son's arm with tears in her eyes. "Robert, a miracle happened today. Someone finally saw our girl for who she really is." She told him about Michael and how he had managed to include Emily in the party. Robert watched the young musician interacting with the children and felt immense gratitude. Amanda approached them, visibly uncomfortable with the situation. "Dr. Robert, I hope you don't mind the extra activity the musician organized." Robert looked at her with a serious expression. "Actually, Amanda, I'd like to know why my daughter was alone in the corner when I arrived. I thought this was a party to include all the children in the neighborhood." The direct question left Amanda speechless. She knew she had specifically advised the other mothers to keep their children away from Emily, claiming it would be easier for everyone. "Well, it's just that children sometimes don't know how," she stammered. "How to treat a deaf person with respect and affection," completed Robert. "Maybe the problem isn't with the children, but with the way we adults teach them to react to difference." The comment hit several parents present. Many of them had never really thought about how their attitudes influenced their children's behavior. Catherine took the opportunity to make a proposal. "Dr. Robert, I run a school that specializes in inclusive education. I would very much like to learn more about the work this young man is doing. Perhaps we could develop a joint project." Michael, who had overheard part of the conversation, approached timidly. "Sorry to interrupt, but I don't have a background in education. I'm just a street musician." "The best innovations sometimes come from people who think outside traditional patterns," replied Catherine. "What you did here today is something many professionals in the field would love to achieve." Robert extended his hand to Michael. "I don't know how to thank you for what you did for my daughter today. I haven't seen her this happy in a long time." "Actually, she's the one who taught me something important," replied Michael. "Music isn't just sound. It's connection. It's emotion. It's a way to touch people's souls." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us, who are just starting out. Now continuing. While the adults were talking, the children continued exploring this new form of communication. Olivia had become instant best friends with Emily, and they were talking through a mix of signs they had learned and gestures they invented themselves. "Emily, do you want to play musical chairs with me?" asked Olivia through signs. Emily's eyes lit up but then showed worry. How could she participate in a game that depended on hearing when the music stopped? Michael noticed the situation and had another creative idea. "How about we adapt the game?" and he suggested. "Instead of stopping when the music stops, we'll stop when I raise this red flag." He improvised a flag using a red napkin tied to a spoon. That way, Emily could participate in the game by watching the visual signal instead of relying only on hearing. The game was an absolute success. All the children loved this new version, and Emily was able to participate on equal footing. She even won one of the rounds, causing shouts of joy and applause from everyone present. Jessica Wilson, Amanda's cousin, and also the mother of one of the children present, pulled the hostess aside. "Amanda, don't you think you were a bit excessive in your resistance to including the girl?" she asked quietly. "Jessica, you don't understand. I organized this party to be perfect. I didn't want complications." "But what complications? The girl is adorable, and the children are having more fun now than they were before." Amanda watched her own daughter playing happily with Emily and realized her cousin was right. Olivia seemed happier and more excited than she had been the entire party. "Maybe I was a little hasty in my worries," she admitted reluctantly. "A little hasty? Amanda, you practically forbade the children from interacting with her." The reality of her actions began to weigh on Amanda's conscience. She had allowed her prejudices and anxieties to affect an innocent child. Meanwhile, Margaret was talking with other grandmothers present at the party. At 68 years old, she had spent the last 3 years trying to find ways to help Emily integrate socially. "You can't imagine how hard it is to see a child being constantly excluded," she said to Mrs. Eleanor, Ethan's grandmother. "Emily would come home crying after trying to play with other children." "I didn't know that," replied Eleanor, clearly touched. "If I had known, I would have guided my grandson differently." "The problem is that most people are afraid of what they don't know," explained Margaret. Deafness isn't contagious. It's not a disease. It's just a different way of experiencing the world. Catherine joined the conversation. At my school, I see daily how children naturally adapt to diversity when they're exposed to it from an early age. Prejudice is something we learn, not something we're born with. Exactly, agreed Margaret. Look at how the children are interacting now. They don't see Emily as different. They see her as a new friend with interesting skills. The observation was true. The children had created their own games and activities that naturally included sign language communication. Some even preferred to talk this way, finding it more fun than verbal communication. Robert had been silent, watching his daughter. As a doctor, he perfectly understood Emily's condition, but as a father, he had struggled for years to find ways to ensure she had a normal and happy childhood. "Michael," he called, "can I talk to you for a moment?" The two moved away from the main group. "You said you have a deaf brother. How did you all grow up dealing with that?" Michael sighed, remembering his own childhood. "It wasn't easy, Doctor. Nathan is 3 years younger than me, and for a long time I felt like it was my responsibility to protect him from everything. But I realized that by trying to protect him too much, I was limiting his experiences." "That's exactly how I feel," admitted Robert. "I get so worried that she'll face rejection that I sometimes avoid social situations completely. But isolating her won't protect her. It will only deprive her of discovering that there are people in the world willing to get to know the real her, like what happened here today." Robert reflected on the young musician's words. He realized that in his attempt to spare Emily from possible emotional hurts, he had inadvertently contributed to her social isolation. "You're right," he said finally. "I need to give her more opportunities to show who she really is." "And she's an amazing girl," Michael replied, smiling. "Smart, curious, affectionate. Any kid would be lucky to have her as a friend." Across the hall, Emily was teaching Olivia and Ethan how to feel different types of rhythm through the vibrations in the floor. She had placed their hands on different surfaces while Michael played, showing how each material transmitted the vibrations differently. "The wooden floor feels better than the glass table," said Ethan, amazed by the discovery. "And the wall transmits it stronger than the floor," added Olivia. Emily smiled proudly, happy to be able to teach something to her new friends. For the first time in her life, she felt special in a positive way instead of just different. Amanda approached the group of children, carrying the birthday cake with lit candles. "It's time to sing Happy Birthday," she announced. The children gathered around the table. Michael continued playing Happy Birthday to You on the guitar, but this time he positioned the instrument so Emily could feel the vibrations through the table. When it was time to blow out the candles, Olivia held Emily's hand. "Let's blow them out together," she said through the signs she had learned. The two girls blew out the candles simultaneously, drawing applause from everyone present. It was a symbolic moment, two children from seemingly different worlds coming together in a simple but meaningful action. After the cake, the children went back to playing, but this time they all naturally included Emily. She had become not just accepted, but truly liked by the group. "Emily, can you teach me more signs?" asked a girl named Sophia. "And can you show me how to feel music like you do?" asked another boy. Emily was radiant. She had never felt so popular and included. Her self-esteem, which had been undermined by years of exclusion, was beginning to rebuild. Margaret watched everything with tears of joy in her eyes. As a grandmother, she had suffered along with her granddaughter through every rejection, every time she came home alone and sad. "Mom, thank you," said Robert, putting his arm around his mother's shoulders. "Why, son?" "For never giving up believing that this day would come. For always insisting that Emily deserved to have friends like any other child. I always knew she was special. I was just waiting for the world to discover it too." Catherine approached Michael again. "I'm genuinely interested in discussing an educational project. Would you be interested in giving some lectures at my school?" "I would be honored," Michael replied, "but I need to be honest. I'm going through some financial difficulties. I accept any work that comes my way just to be able to pay the bills." "Then maybe we can solve two problems at once," said Catherine, smiling. I need someone creative to develop more inclusive teaching methods, and you clearly have a natural talent for that. Are you serious? Completely. I've seen many degreed professionals who can't do what you did here today in just 2 hours. Michael felt an emotion he hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Perhaps his passion for music could be channeled into something bigger than just playing on the streets for money. Robert joined the conversation. May I suggest we start with a pilot project? Maybe some weekly sessions here in the neighborhood for deaf and hearing children to interact together? Excellent idea, Catherine agreed. I can make school resources available to support this, and I can offer my house as a meeting place, added Robert. I have a large backyard that would be perfect. Emily, who had noticed the adults were talking about something important, approached curiously. Michael bent down to her level and began making signs. We are planning to have more days like today, where you can play and learn with other children. Emily's eyes filled with tears of happiness. She hugged Michael tightly as a way of showing her gratitude. She wants to know if the other children will be there, translated Margaret. Of course they will, replied Olivia, appearing beside them. I want to learn much more about signs. Me too, said Ethan and Sophia almost in unison. The party was coming to an end, but what had started there was just beginning. Relationships had been formed, prejudices had been broken, and a new, more inclusive community was being born. Amanda, who had observed everything in silence for the last hour, finally approached Robert. Dr. Robert, I would like to apologize, she said, clearly uncomfortable. I think I didn't handle the situation with Emily well at the start of the party. Robert looked at her for a moment before answering. Amanda, we all have prejudices. The important thing is to recognize them and work to change them. Your daughter showed today how children can be naturally inclusive when we give them the opportunity. Olivia was delighted with everything. She won't stop talking about how she wants to learn more signs. Emily would love to teach. She's never had the opportunity to share her language with other children. Amanda looked at the two girls who were playing together as if they were long-time friends. Could they keep meeting? To play together? Of course, Robert replied, smiling. Emily would be very happy. It was an important moment of reconciliation. Amanda had recognized her mistakes and was willing to change, which opened doors for a more inclusive future. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. As the guests began to say their goodbyes, promises were made and contacts were exchanged. What had been planned as a common birthday party had turned into something much bigger. The beginning of real social change in the community. Michael was putting away his guitar when Margaret approached him. My young man, you don't know what you did today. For years I've been praying for someone to see my granddaughter the way you saw her. Mrs. Margaret, I just did what my heart told me to. Emily is a special girl, and anyone with a little bit of sensitivity would be able to see that. Unfortunately, not everyone has that sensitivity, she replied, taking a sum of money from her purse. I know you were hired as a musician, but what you did went far beyond that. Michael politely refused the extra money. The payment I received from Mrs. Amanda is plenty. But may I ask a favor? Of course, anything. When we start the weekly meetings, I would like you to participate as well. I will need someone who truly understands sign language to help me. It would be an honor, replied Margaret, moved. Robert joined them. Michael, do you have family? Besides your brother? Our parents died in an accident when Nathan was 5 and I was 8. It's been just the two of us ever since. I work to support us both. The information touched Robert deeply. Realizing that Michael had taken on the responsibility of raising his younger brother under such difficult circumstances made him admire the young musician even more. You mentioned your brother is deaf. Does he receive any kind of educational support? He tries to study at a public school, but it's difficult. Most teachers don't know sign language, so he gets very lost. Perhaps I can help with that too, suggested Catherine, who had overheard part of the conversation. We have some scholarships available for children with special needs. Michael felt his life was changing completely in a matter of hours. Not only was he getting a decent work opportunity, but also a chance to secure a better education for Nathan. "I don't know what to say," he murmured, clearly emotional. "You don't need to say anything right now," replied Robert. "Let's meet next week to plan everything calmly." Emily approached them, tugging on Michael's shirt sleeve. When he bent down, she made a few signs. "She wants to know if you're coming back," translated Margaret. "Of course I'm coming back," Michael replied, using signs. "We'll see each other every week." The smile that lit up Emily's face was the greatest reward Michael could have received. The families began to disperse, but not before a few more important conversations took place. Jessica approached her cousin Amanda. "Today was a day that changed my perspective on many things," she said. "I never thought about how my actions could affect other people, especially children." "I also learned a lot," Amanda agreed. "Olivia taught me more about acceptance in a few hours than I had learned in years. Children really are wiser than us sometimes." Across the hall, the grandmothers present were talking about future plans. "Mrs. Margaret, you need to know that we will all support this project," said Mrs. Eleanor. "Our grandchildren were fascinated by everything they learned today. And we can take turns helping with the activities," added another grandmother. "I have some materials at home that might be useful." Margaret was moved by the unexpected support. For years she had felt alone in the struggle to include Emily socially. Suddenly she had a whole network of people willing to help. "You don't know how much this means to me," she said, wiping away tears. "Yes, we do," replied Mrs. Eleanor. "We are all grandmothers. We understand the unconditional love we feel for our grandchildren." Robert had been observing the interactions between the children all afternoon. As a doctor, he was used to analyzing situations objectively, but as a father he was experiencing deep emotions. Catherine approached him. "Dr. Robert, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course. What has it been like for you to raise Emily? I mean, facing all the social challenges you must have certainly encountered?" Robert sighed deeply before answering. "It has been the most difficult and most rewarding experience of my life. Emily is a brilliant girl, but the world isn't always ready to receive her. I imagine it must have been frustrating." "Very much so. There are times when I feel angry at society, at the education systems, at the people who look at her with pity or fear. But there are also moments like today, which remind me that there are good people willing to make a difference. Emily is lucky to have a father who fights so hard for her. Actually, I'm the lucky one to have a daughter who teaches me daily about strength, resilience, and unconditional love." The conversation was interrupted by Emily, who ran to her father with Olivia by her side. "Dad, Olivia invited me for a sleepover at her house next week," she signed excitedly. Robert looked at Amanda, who nodded with a smile. "It would be a pleasure to have Emily over at our house," she said. It was another sign of the transformation that had happened that afternoon. Emily hadn't just made friends. She was being truly accepted as part of the children's social group. Michael was almost leaving when Ethan ran up to him. "Mister, can you teach me to play the guitar too?" "Of course. During our weekly meetings, we can include music lessons for anyone who's interested." "That's so cool, I'm going to tell all my friends at school." Ethan's idea gave Michael an inspiration. Perhaps they could expand the project to include more children, not just from the neighborhood, but from other areas too. He said goodbye to everyone with a heart full of hope and gratitude. The day had started with him worried only about earning the necessary money to pay the week's bills. It was ending with a new life perspective and possibilities he had never imagined. When he got home that night, Michael found Nathan doing homework at the kitchen table. At 22, Nathan was 3 years younger than Michael, but he had developed impressive maturity due to the circumstances of their lives. "How was work today?" Nathan asked through signs. Michael sat next to his brother and told him in detail about everything that had happened at the party. Nathan was fascinated by the story. "You did the right thing," he said. "I know what it's like to be in that girl's position. Nathan, maybe we can change that. For you, for her, for other kids." "How?" Michael explained about the opportunities that had come up, the work with Catherine, the weekly project, the possibility of Nathan getting a scholarship to a better school. "That sounds too good to be true," replied Nathan, cautious. "I know. I'm also afraid of getting my hopes up too much, but sometimes life surprises us in positive ways." And if it doesn't work out? Then at least we tried, and we already managed to make a difference in one girl's life today. Nathan smiled. He admired his older brother's determination and optimism, even in the face of the difficulties they endured. Can I meet this girl? Of course. I think you two will get along very well. She's smart and brave, just like you. The two brothers spent the rest of the night talking about future plans, something they hadn't done in a long time. Hope had returned to their lives. At the Johnson family's house, Emily couldn't sleep because she was so excited. She was lying in bed, mentally replaying all the special moments of the day. For the first time in her life, she had been the protagonist of a positive social situation. Margaret entered her granddaughter's room. "Still awake?" she asked through signs. "I can't stop thinking about everything that happened," replied Emily. "It was a very special day indeed." "Grandma, why didn't other people ever want to be my friends before?" The question broke Margaret's heart. How do you explain an 8-year-old the prejudices and fears of adults? "Sometimes people are afraid of what they don't know," she explained carefully. "It's not because you aren't worthy of friendship. It's because they didn't know how to be friends with someone like you. And now they know. Now they know. And they discovered that you are a wonderful girl who has a lot to offer." I liked teaching signs to the other children. "You were an excellent teacher." Emily Johnson was silent for a few moments, processing everything. "Grandma, is Michael really coming back?" "Yes, he is, my dear, and not just him. Many people are going to be part of your life from now on." "I'm happy," signed Emily with a smile. "I'm happy too, happier than I've been in a long time." Margaret kissed her granddaughter's forehead and said goodbye. When she reached the living room, she found Robert still awake, reading some medical documents. "How is she?" he asked. "Radiant." "She can't stop talking about the day." "Me neither. I'm still processing everything that happened." "Robert, do you realize our life changed today?" "I do, and I'm grateful for it. I was beginning to lose hope that Emily could have a normal childhood. She always had the potential for it. We just needed the right people to see it. That young man's courage in challenging the status quo made all the difference. And the children's receptiveness. They taught us an important lesson about acceptance." Robert closed the documents and focused on the conversation with his mother. "Mum, thank you for never giving up believing that this day would come. I never doubted that Emily would find her place in the world. I just didn't know when or how. Now we know her place is with other children, learning and teaching like any other child her age." "Exactly, and we have an entire community willing to support that." At the Wilson house, Olivia couldn't stop telling her parents about everything she had learned during the party. "Mummy, did you know there are people who hear music with their whole body?" Amanda Wilson smiled, seeing her daughter's enthusiasm. "I didn't know, honey. Can you teach me some of the signs you learned?" "Of course. Look, this means thank you, and this means friend." Olivia demonstrated the gestures carefully, proud of the knowledge she had acquired. "Mum, can I invite Emily over to play tomorrow?" "Of course you can. I'll call Dr. Robert." "And can I ask Daddy to buy a book about sign language?" "What a wonderful idea. We'll all learn together." William Wilson, Olivia's father, had arrived from work in the middle of the conversation. "What are you two talking about?" Amanda told her husband about the events of the party and how Olivia had connected with Emily. "That's amazing," said William. "I always wondered why we never saw Dr. Robert's daughter playing with other children. Now we know why, and we're going to do our part to change that." "Absolutely. I'm so proud of our daughter for having such an open heart." Olivia hugged her parents. "You're going to like Emily a lot. She's super smart and taught me things I never imagined." The transformation in the Wilson family was emblematic of the change happening throughout the community. Prejudices were being replaced by curiosity and acceptance. At the school where Catherine Davis worked, she spent the whole night drafting proposals for the Inclusion Project. As an experienced educator, she knew that what she had witnessed that afternoon was special and needed to be documented and replicated. She called her assistant even though it was late. "Sophia, I know it's late, but I need your help with something urgent, first thing tomorrow morning." "Of course, Catherine. What do you need?" Let's develop a proposal for a pilot project on inclusive education. I met a young man today who has revolutionary ideas about how to integrate deaf and hearing children. How interesting. Can we schedule a meeting with him? I'll schedule it for next week. I also need to research funding for social educational projects. I'll start the research first thing tomorrow. Sophia, I have a good feeling about this. It could be the beginning of something very important. I trust your instinct, Catherine. Your projects always work out. Catherine stayed up late, planning details and writing down ideas. Her 30 years of experience in education told her that Michael had something special, a natural ability to connect people that went far beyond academic training. Meanwhile, in the homes of the other families who had attended the party, similar conversations were happening. Ethan told his parents about how he had learned to feel music in a completely new way. Sophia was teaching basic sign language to her older siblings. The grandmothers who were present called other grandmothers in the neighborhood, spreading the news about the project being organized. A support network and interest were forming naturally, driven by the children's genuine enthusiasm and the open-mindedness of the adults who had witnessed the transformation. The following Monday, Robert received a call at his office. "Dr. Robert, this is Catherine Davis. We spoke at the party on Sunday." "Of course, Professor Catherine. How can I help you?" "I would like to schedule a meeting with you and Michael to discuss the project we mentioned. I've obtained preliminary approval from my school's administration for a pilot program." "Really? What wonderful news. I've also contacted some institutions that fund social educational projects. There is real interest in what you propose to do." Robert felt a growing excitement. Things were moving faster than he had imagined. "When can we meet? How about Wednesday afternoon? I can make a room available at the school for us to talk calmly." "Perfect, I'll contact Michael. Dr. Robert, I would also like to meet his brother that you mentioned. If we're going to work with inclusion, it's important to have people with lived experience as part of the team." "Excellent idea. I'll suggest that he brings Nathan to the meeting." When Robert called Michael with the news, the young musician could barely contain his excitement. "Dr. Robert, is this for real?" "It's real, Michael. Your idea is gaining momentum. I don't know if I'm ready for something this big. Nobody is born ready. Readiness comes with experience, and you've already proven you have the right instinct." "Can Nathan really participate?" "Not only can, but he should. His perspective will be fundamental to the project's success." Michael hung up the phone and immediately told everything to Nathan, who was studying at the kitchen table. "They want me to participate too?" asked Nathan, surprised. "They do. You have experience that none of us have. You know what it's like to be deaf in a world made for hearing people." "But I've never worked in education." "Neither have I. But sometimes life experience is worth more than diplomas." Nathan was thoughtful for a few moments. "Michael, if this works, it could change the lives of many children like that girl you met. And like you too." "Exactly. I think we should try." The two brothers spent the following days preparing for the meeting, researching inclusive education and organizing their ideas. On Wednesday, they arrived at Catherine's school, nervous but hopeful. The school was impressive, modern, well-equipped, with a welcoming atmosphere that immediately made them feel more comfortable. Catherine greeted them at the entrance. "Michael, Nathan, what a joy to meet you in person, Nathan." She made a point of greeting Nathan in sign language, which impressed him and made him feel more at ease. "Nice to meet you, teacher," he replied through signs. "The pleasure is mine. Shall we go to the meeting room?" Robert was already waiting when they arrived. Also present were Sophia, Catherine's assistant, and William Johnson, the school's pedagogical coordinator. "Well, shall we begin?" said Catherine. "William, can you present what we found out about funding?" "Of course. There are at least 3 foundations that fund innovative, inclusive education projects. 2 of them have already expressed preliminary interest based on the description we sent." Michael and Nathan exchanged astonished looks. This was becoming much more serious and professional than they had imagined. "What exactly did you send to these foundations?" asked Robert. "A basic proposal based on what Michael did at the party," explained Sophia. "Sensory teaching methodology for integrating deaf and hearing children, using music as a communication bridge." "It sounds so Official, murmured Michael. Because it is official, replied Catherine, smiling. You've created something important. Now we're going to structure it properly. William continued the presentation. The idea would be to start with a 3-month pilot program. 2 meetings per week, 1 hour each, with groups of no more than 10 children. Half deaf, half hearing? Asked Nathan. Exactly. The proposal is to create an environment where both groups learn from each other. And where would it happen? Robert wanted to know. Initially here at the school, replied Catherine, but if it works, we can expand to other communities. Michael felt like his head was spinning. In less than a week, he had gone from an unemployed street musician to a potential coordinator of a funded educational project. And what exactly would my role be in all this? He asked. You would be the pedagogical coordinator of the project, explained Catherine. You would develop the activities, train other professionals in the methodology, document the results. And my role? Asked Nathan. Accessibility and communication consultant, replied William. You would help us understand the real needs of the deaf children and develop adapted materials. You would receive proper salaries, of course, added Catherine. It's not volunteer work. Michael had to try hard not to cry. The opportunity was much bigger than anything he had ever dreamed of. I accept, he said finally, but I'll need a lot of training and support. That's planned for, replied Sophia. We have partnerships with other institutions that can offer training. Nathan also agreed to participate in the project. For the first time in his life, he felt that his condition as a deaf person could be seen as a professional advantage, not as a limitation. When would we start? Asked Robert. If all goes well with the funding, in 1 month, replied Catherine. And could Emily participate? Of course, in fact, we hope she'll be one of the first to enroll. The meeting continued for another 2 hours, with all the details being discussed and planned. When it ended, Michael and Nathan were mentally exhausted, but extremely excited. Michael, said Catherine at the farewell, do you realize you might be changing the way inclusive education is done in this country? I'm trying not to think about that so I don't get even more nervous, he replied, laughing. Be nervous, it means you understand the importance of what you're doing. On the way back home, the brothers could hardly believe what had happened. Nathan, our lives have just completely changed, said Michael. I know, and I'm scared and excited at the same time. Do you think we'll be able to do a good job? If we do it with the same heart you did at the party, it will work out. We're going to have to study a lot. We've always studied a lot. The difference is that now we're studying something that can make a difference in other people's lives. When they got home, they immediately called some close friends to share the news. The news spread quickly through their community, bringing pride and inspiration to many people facing similar difficulties. Meanwhile, Robert had come home with news for Emily and Margaret. How was the meeting? Margaret asked anxiously. Better than I could have imagined. The project is really going to happen. Really? Emily made excited signs. Really? And you're going to be one of the first participants. When does it start? In a month. Emily ran to her room to get a calendar, wanting to mark the special date. Her excitement was contagious. Robert, this is going to mean work for us too, Margaret commented. How so? We'll have to take Emily to the meetings, participate in the activities, possibly help with other children. Are you worried about that? On the contrary, I'm excited. I'll finally be able to do something practical to help other families going through the same situation we did. Our family's experience can really help other people, and Emily will learn that she's not alone in the world, that there are other deaf children facing the same challenges. Robert realized his mother was right. The project wouldn't just benefit Emily, but the whole Johnson family. They could finally channel years of experience and learning into something constructive. That night, Emily did something she hadn't done in a long time. She drew. She took paper and colored pencils and created a drawing representing the Sunday party. In the center of the page, she drew herself next to several other children, all smiling and making hand signs. Above everything, she drew a colorful rainbow. When she showed the drawing to Robert and Margaret, they were both moved. It was the visual representation of the hope and happiness that had returned to the girl's life. Can I show my drawing to Michael? She asked. Of course you can, Robert replied. I'm sure he'll be very happy. I'm going to make a drawing for every child I met at the party. Emily's idea started a personal project for her, to create personalized drawings for each of her new friends. It was her way of returning the friendship and acceptance she had received. The next day, Olivia appeared at the Johnsons' door with her mother. "Hi, Emily. I brought something for you," she said, making basic signs she had learned. Olivia handed Emily a book about sign language and a small visual dictionary. "Mom and Dad bought it for me, but I want us to learn together." Emily was radiant with the gift. She had never received books related to her condition from anyone outside her family. "Would you like to come in for a snack?" Margaret offered. "We'd love to," Amanda replied. The two girls sat at the kitchen table with the books, while the mothers talked in the living room. Emily began teaching more complex signs to Olivia, who absorbed everything with enthusiasm. "Amanda," said Margaret, "I can't express how grateful I am for the change in your attitude." "Margaret, I'm the one who should apologize. I let my fears and prejudices affect an innocent child. The important thing is that everything has changed now. It really has." Olivia won't stop talking about Emily. She wants to learn everything about sign language, about what it's like to be deaf, about how she can be a better friend. Emily is transformed too. I've never seen her so social and confident. Children teach us so much about acceptance, don't they? They do. They aren't born with prejudices. Those are learned. The conversation was deep and transformative for both women. They realized they had allowed preconceived notions to guide their actions, but that there was still time to change that. "Margaret, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "How did you find out that Emily was deaf?" Margaret sighed, remembering the difficult early years. "When she was about a year old, we started noticing she didn't react to loud sounds. At first, the pediatrician said it was normal that some children are less sensitive to noise." "When were you sure?" "When she was 2 years old and still hadn't spoken a single word. We did several tests until we got a definitive diagnosis." "What was it like receiving the news?" "Devastating at first. Robert went into a phase of denial. I cried for weeks, and Robert's father, well, he had a hard time accepting it. And now we see that deafness is just one of Emily's characteristics, like her eye color or hair type. She is so much more than her hearing condition." "How long did it take to reach that perspective?" "Years, and a lot of family therapy, a lot of education on the subject, a lot of support from specialized professionals." Amanda listened carefully, realizing how much she didn't know about the challenges faced by the neighboring family. "What can people do to help families in the same situation?" "Simply treat deaf children like normal children, not like wounded little animals that need pity, nor like curiosities to be avoided." It sounds simple when you say it like that. It is simple. The complicated part is the prejudices we create in our heads. The conversation continued for over an hour, creating a solid foundation for the friendship that was developing between the two families. When Amanda and Olivia left, Emily showed her grandmother all the new signs she had taught her friend. "She learns very fast," commented Emily. "That's great. It means you'll be able to talk about everything." "Grandma, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course, dear." "I always wanted to have a best friend. I thought I never would because I'm different. And now I know that being different can be something special, not something bad." Margaret hugged her granddaughter tightly, knowing those words represented a fundamental transformation in the girl's self-esteem. That same week, Michael started receiving calls from various people interested in the project. The news had spread through the community, and families with deaf children from other neighborhoods wanted to participate. "Michael," said one of the mothers who called, "my son is 10 years old and has never had a hearing friend. Would you accept him into the project?" "Of course we would," replied Michael. "The more children who participate, the better. When can I bring him to meet you?" "We're still getting everything organized, but in 2 weeks, we'll have a meeting for interested families." "I'll definitely be there." Similar calls kept coming in all week. Michael realized the demand was much greater than he had initially imagined. He talked about it with Catherine. "Professor, we're getting a lot more interest than we expected." "That's wonderful. It means we're meeting a real need. But it also means we're going to need more resources, more space, more people involved. Leave it with me. I'll talk to the administration about expanding the project from the start. Do you think it's smart to start so big? Michael, when something is necessary and it works, growth is natural. It's better to prepare from the beginning. The conversation resulted in a new meeting with the school administration and the funding foundations. The project, which was initially supposed to be small and experimental, was becoming something much more ambitious. William contacted other schools in the region to propose a partnership. The idea was to create a network of institutions that would offer the program serving different communities. Michael, he said during a call, we have 3 schools interested in implementing the project simultaneously. Really? I don't know if I'm ready to coordinate something that big. You won't be alone. Each school would have its own team, but they would all follow the methodology you develop. And could Nathan help with training? Of course. Actually, we're thinking of including other deaf young people as consultants at each location. The idea was becoming a real movement for social transformation, far beyond what Michael had imagined when he decided to approach Emily at the party. Nathan was also being sought out by deaf organizations that had heard about the project. Michael, he said one night, I received an invitation to speak at a conference about inclusion. What kind of conference? A meeting of educators who work with deaf children. They want me to talk about our approach. Do you feel ready for that? I don't know. I've never spoken publicly about these subjects. But you have a lot to contribute. Your experience is valuable. It's strange to think that my condition as a deaf person can be seen as a professional qualification. It is a qualification. You understand things that we, hearing people, will never fully understand. Nathan decided to accept the invitation. It was an opportunity to represent the deaf community and influence educational policies at a broader level. 2 weeks after the party that changed everything, the project's first official meeting took place. The auditorium at Catherine's school was packed with families interested in participating. Michael was nervous, but Nathan at his side reassured him. Just speak from the heart, like you did with Emily, he advised. Good evening, everyone, Michael began. 2 weeks ago, I was just a street musician trying to earn money playing at a children's party. Today, we are here to talk about how to transform inclusive education. The audience listened attentively as Michael told the story of how it all began. He talked about Emily, about the other children at the party, about how small actions can generate big changes. What we've learned is that children don't have natural prejudices. They are willing to accept and include when we give them the right tools, he explained. Nathan added, as a deaf person, I can say that exclusion is not the result of deafness itself, but the lack of communication opportunities. When those barriers are removed, differences become irrelevant. Catherine presented the practical details of the program, schedules, activities, learning objectives, participation criteria. We want to create an environment where deaf and hearing children learn together, communicate freely, and develop genuine friendships, she said. The family's response was extremely positive. More than 50 families signed up for the pilot program. We're going to have to create multiple groups to meet all this demand, William commented to Catherine. A good problem to have, she replied, smiling. After the presentation, many families approached Michael and Nathan to share their own stories and challenges. It was clear that the need for inclusive programs was much greater than anyone had imagined. One mother said, My daughter is 8 years old and has never been invited to a birthday party. I hope that changes with your project. Another family commented, Our hearing son has always wanted to learn sign language. Do you think you could teach him? Of course, Michael replied. The idea is that everyone learns from everyone. Robert and Margaret were present with Emily, who was excited to see so many other deaf children at the event. Dad, can I talk to them? Asked Emily. Of course you can. Emily spent the entire evening making new friends, discovering that she was not alone in her experiences. She met other children who had faced similar exclusion and also others who had very welcoming families. A 9-year-old girl named Madison approached Emily. Hi, are you the girl Michael met at the party? I am. And you? I live in another neighborhood, but my mom heard about the project and brought me here. Have you ever had hearing friends? A few, but they always get tired of trying to communicate with me. I never had any, until I met Michael and became friends with Olivia. What's it like having a hearing friend? It's like having any friend. She learned signs and I got better at reading lips. Now we talk about everything. The conversation between the two girls perfectly summarized the project's goal: to normalize relationships between deaf and hearing children through communication and mutual understanding. Olivia was also present at the parent meeting. When she saw Emily talking with Madison, she approached them. "Can I join the conversation?" she asked, using signs. Madison was surprised to see a hearing girl communicating in sign language. "Did you learn signs by yourself?" "Emily taught me, and I'm also studying from books." "That's so cool. You're the first hearing person I've met who learned signs on their own. Why wouldn't someone want to learn? It's a beautiful language." The naturalness with which Olivia treated sign language impressed not only Madison, but several other children and parents who were observing the interaction. The end of the meeting was marked by a lot of optimism and expectation. The families left, feeling they were participating in something historic and transformative. Michael and Nathan stayed late, talking with Catherine and William about the next steps. "We're going to need to hire more people," said Catherine. "The demand has completely exceeded our expectations." "What kind of professionals?" asked Michael. "Other music educators, sign language interpreters, psychologists specialized in child development, and material resources, adapted musical instruments, visual materials, sound equipment that produces suitable vibrations." Nathan suggested, "We could include older deaf teenagers as mentors for the younger children. It would be good for both groups." "Excellent idea," agreed William. "Peer mentorship is very effective." "And we can train the mentors to help with the activities," added Michael. The conversation went on late into the night, but when they finished, they had a solid plan to implement the project in 3 different schools, serving over 100 children in the pilot program. "Michael," said Catherine at the farewell, "do you realize that in 3 weeks your life has completely changed?" "I'm still trying to process it," he replied. "Sometimes it feels like a dream." "It's not a dream. It's the result of having an open heart and the courage to act when you saw an injustice. I hope I'm up to the responsibility." "You will be, I'm sure of it." On the way home, Michael and Nathan reflected on everything that had happened. "Nathan, do you regret agreeing to participate?" "On the contrary. For the first time in my life, I feel like my experience as a deaf person has value to other people. It's going to be a lot of work, but work with purpose. How many people can say they make a difference in other people's lives every day?" "True, and we're still going to help many families like ours." "Exactly. Other children won't have to go through what I went through in school. And other siblings won't feel as lost as I sometimes felt." The conversation between the brothers touched on deep points of the experience of growing up with hearing loss in a family without specialized resources. Both carried emotional scars from those years, but now they had the opportunity to turn those difficult experiences into tools to help others. 1 month after Olivia's party, the first official day of the project arrived. 3 schools opened their doors simultaneously to welcome deaf and hearing children in a joint inclusive education program. At the school where Catherine worked, Michael arrived early to prepare everything. He had spent weeks studying pedagogy, child psychology, and inclusive education techniques. Nathan was by his side, organizing visual materials and testing equipment. "Nervous?" asked Nathan. "Very. And you?" "Me too, but it's a good kind of nervousness." "How so?" "It's the nervousness of someone who's about to do something important for the first time." The first families began to arrive at 2 in the afternoon. Emily was one of the first, accompanied by Robert and Margaret. She was clearly anxious, but also excited. "How are you feeling?" Michael asked through signs. "Excited and scared at the same time," she replied. "That's normal. We're all feeling that way." Olivia arrived shortly after with Amanda. The 2 friends hugged as if they hadn't seen each other in months, even though they had played together just the day before. "Ready for our first official class?" Olivia asked in signs. "More than ready," replied Emily. Other children gradually arrived. The group consisted of 12 children, 6 deaf and 6 hearing, aged between 7 and 10. Madison, the girl Emily had met at the meeting, was also there. Michael asked all the children to sit in a circle on the floor. He positioned himself in the center, with his guitar and several other percussion instruments. "Welcome to our first meeting," he said, speaking and signing simultaneously. "Today we're going to discover amazing things about music, communication, and friendship." He started with the same activity he had done at the party. He taught the children how to feel musical vibrations through the floor. But this time, he was more prepared and had specific materials for the activity. "Place your hands here," he instructed, showing a wooden board specially designed to amplify vibrations. The hearing children were fascinated to experience hearing music the way the deaf children did, and the deaf children were proud to be able to teach something special to their new friends. "Now let's learn some basic signs," said Nathan, taking the lead for the next activity. Over the next half hour, he taught essential words like friend, thank you, please, a cool, a fun, and music. The hearing children absorbed them quickly, while the deaf children helped by correcting gestures and offering tips. "My turn to teach," said Emily, raising her hand. Michael smiled and invited her to the front of the group. Emily taught a visual version of Ring Around the Rosie that she had created during the week. Each line of the song was accompanied by specific gestures that told the story. The children loved the novelty and quickly learned to sing the song through hand movements. It was beautiful to see 6 hearing and 6 deaf children performing the same artistic activity in perfect harmony. "How about we create our own song?" Michael suggested. The children were excited by the idea. They split into mixed groups, deaf and hearing together, to compose original lyrics and rhythms. One group created a song about friendship that combined spoken words with visual signs. Another group made a composition based entirely on rhythms that could be felt through beats on the floor. The third group, led by Emily and Olivia, created a symphony of colors, where each color represented a different sound or feeling. "Red is strong joy, like shouting with happiness," explained Olivia. "Blue is soft sadness, like when you feel longing," added Emily. "Green is peace, like when everything is calm," completed Madison. When each group presented their creation to the others, something magical happened. The children not only appreciated the creative differences between the groups, but began combining ideas to create something even bigger. "We can put it all together into one big presentation," suggested Ethan, who had participated in the original party. "How?" asked one of the deaf children. "The music from the first group can be the beginning, the symphony of colors can be the middle, and the rhythms can be the end." The idea was met with enthusiasm. The children spent the last half hour of the meeting rehearsing a collaborative presentation that incorporated all the forms of expression they had explored. When the parents arrived to pick up the children, they insisted on showing what they had created. The improvised presentation left all the adults emotional. Robert whispered to Margaret, "Have you ever seen Emily so confident and expressive?" "Never. She is literally glowing." Amanda commented to Catherine, "Olivia talks about these meetings all week long. It's what excites her the most." "It's what excites all of them," replied Catherine. "Just look at the energy of this group." After the children had left, Michael, Nathan, and the other educators gathered to evaluate the first day. "What did you think?" asked Michael. "Better than I expected," replied Sophia, who had observed all the activities. "The integration between the groups was natural and spontaneous." "The deaf children felt valued," added Nathan. "They weren't just receivers of help, but also teachers." "And the hearing children were genuinely interested in learning about deaf culture," observed William. Catherine took detailed notes on everything that had worked well and aspects that could be improved. "We need to document these methodologies carefully," she said. "Other schools will want to replicate what we're doing." "Do we already have interested parties?" asked Michael. 5 schools from other cities called this week. "And a university wants to study our program." "A university?" "Yes, for academic research on innovations in inclusive education." Michael could hardly believe that something he had started on impulse was gaining academic recognition. Nathan suggested, "We can create an activity manual for other schools to use." "Great idea," agreed William. and demonstration videos too. But first, let's complete our pilot program and see what the results really are, Catherine wisely pondered. The meeting continued for another hour, planning the next meetings and refining the activities based on what had worked on the first day. When Michael got home that night, he was exhausted but fulfilled. Nathan shared the same feeling. "How does it feel working officially for the first time in your life?" asked Michael. "Strange, but good. I never thought I'd be professionally respected for being deaf, rather than in spite of being deaf." "What's the difference?" "When people respect me in spite of my deafness, it's like they're doing me a favor. When they respect me because of my experience as a deaf person, it's genuine recognition." "I understand. And how does it feel to be called a consultant?" "Important, useful, like my life has a purpose beyond just surviving." Michael was touched by his brother's honesty. For years he had carried guilt for not being able to offer better opportunities for Nathan. Now he saw that both had found not just work, but a life mission. At the Johnson family home, Emily couldn't stop telling Robert and Margaret about the first day. "It was the best day of my life," she signed excitedly. "Why?" asked Robert. "Because for the first time I felt normal. Not special in a bad way, not pitiful, just normal." "What do you mean, normal?" "The other children weren't looking at me with pity or fear. They wanted to learn from me, and I could learn from them too." Margaret was moved by her granddaughter's answer. "And did you make new friends?" "So many. Madison is very funny, and there's a boy named Mason who is deaf like me, but knows how to play the drum using vibrations." "How interesting." "And there's a hearing girl named Charlotte who already knew some signs because her cousin is deaf. It sounds like you formed a wonderful group." "The best group in the world. And Michael said that next week we'll start preparing a presentation for the parents." "What kind of presentation?" "A musical theatre play where half the story is told with signs and half with music. Everyone is going to participate equally." Robert exchanged meaningful looks with Margaret. The change in Emily's self-esteem and confidence was evident and profound. That same night, in various homes across the city, similar conversations were happening. Children were excitedly telling their families about the day's discoveries, parents were reflecting on the transformations they were witnessing, and everyone was beginning to understand they were participating in something much bigger than a simple educational program. At the Wilson house, Olivia was showing her father the signs she had learned. "Daddy, look, this means family, and this means love." William was impressed by the fluency his daughter was developing. "You're learning so fast." "Emily is a very good teacher, and Nathan is too." He explained that every sign has a story, like words. "How interesting. Can you teach me some?" "Of course. First you need to learn hello and thank you." Olivia spent the next hour teaching her father basic sign language, completely reversing the traditional family roles of who teaches and who learns. Amanda watched the interaction with admiration. "William, do you see how much more mature and empathetic our daughter has become since she started interacting with Emily?" "I have noticed. She talks about inclusion, about differences, about friendship in a much deeper way. I think we're learning along with her." "Definitely. I had never seriously thought about how our society treats people with disabilities. Now we think about it every day. And we question our own attitudes and prejudices." The conversation between Olivia's parents reflected a transformation that was happening in many families. The children weren't just participants in the program, they were also informal educators for their own families. A week later, the project's second meeting took place. The children arrived even more excited and confident. They had practiced the activities they learned during the week and were eager to show their progress. "Good afternoon, everyone," Michael greeted them. "How did you practice at home?" "I taught signs to my dog," said Ethan, provoking general laughter. "I created a new song," announced Madison. "And I memorized a poem in signs," added Charlotte. The children's enthusiasm was contagious. Michael began the meeting by asking each one to share what they had practiced during the week. The individual presentations revealed that the children had taken their learning far beyond the classroom. They were incorporating the new skills into their daily lives and sharing them with their families and school friends. "Today we're going to work on something special," Nathan announced. We're going to create a newspaper. A newspaper? Asked Olivia, curious. Yes, a newspaper that can be read by both hearing people and deaf people. Nathan explained that they would create articles using traditional text, but would also include illustrations, photos of signs, and QR codes that would lead to videos in sign language. Each pair will be responsible for a section, he instructed. The pairs were formed by mixing deaf and hearing children. Emily was paired with Charlotte, Olivia with Mason, Madison with Ethan, and so on. What kind of articles can we write? Asked Mason. Anything you find interesting, replied Michael. It can be stories, interviews, reports about hobbies, movie reviews. Can I interview my grandma about what life was like in the old days? Asked Emily. Of course. That would be a wonderful article. And can I write about what it's like learning sign language? Suggested Charlotte. Perfect idea. The children spread out around the room, working in pairs on their projects. The creative energy was impressive. Michael and Nathan circulated among the groups, offering support and suggestions. Emily and Charlotte decided to create a section called Two Perspectives, where they would write about the same subject from different points of view, one deaf and one hearing. Let's write about music, suggested Charlotte. Good idea, agreed Emily. I can explain how I feel music through my body, and you can explain how you hear it. And then we can compare to see what's the same and what's different. Olivia and Mason chose to do a report on the behind-the-scenes of the project. They wanted to interview Michael, Nathan, Catherine, and the participating parents. Why do you want to do that? Asked Michael when they explained the idea. We want other people to know how this project started, replied Olivia. To inspire other schools to do the same, added Mason. Ethan and Madison decided to create an entertainment section with jokes, riddles, and games that worked for both deaf and hearing people. Look at this visual joke I created, showed Madison, making a sequence of gestures that told a funny story without needing words. Brilliant, laughed Ethan. Can I create a musical version of this joke? How so? I can play the same story on the keyboard, with different notes representing each character. The children's creativity constantly surprised the educators. They found ways to connect different languages and forms of expression that adults had never considered. At the end of the session, each pair presented their article idea to the group. The diversity and quality of the proposals impressed everyone. When our newspaper is ready, where will we publish it? Asked Charlotte. We can create a website, suggested Nathan. That way people from anywhere can read it. And we can print some copies to distribute at school and in the neighborhood, added Michael. Can I take a copy to show at my school? Asked Ethan. Of course, in fact, we'd love for you to show other children what we're doing here. The idea of becoming ambassadors for the project excited the children very much. They began to see themselves not just as participants, but as promoters of a new way of thinking about inclusion. Catherine, who had observed everything, approached Michael during the farewell. Do you realize these children are becoming kid activists for inclusion? How so? They're not just learning about diversity. They're becoming agents of change in their schools and communities. Is that good? It's wonderful. Real social change happens when people take ownership of the cause and make it part of their identities. So we're on the right track. We're on the perfect track. That night, Michael reflected on Catherine's words. The project had evolved far beyond his initial expectations. It wasn't just about teaching children to communicate better. It was becoming a movement for social transformation led by the children themselves. Nathan came home with exciting news. Michael, I received a very special invitation today. What is it? The City Education Council wants me to participate in a meeting about inclusion policies. Really? This is incredible. They want to hear about our experience to develop guidelines for other schools. When is the meeting? Next week, and they want you to go too. Michael felt a mix of pride and nervousness. The idea of influencing educational policies was scary, but it also represented an opportunity to multiply the project's impact. Do you think we're ready for this? He asked. I think our experience speaks for itself. Look at what we've accomplished in just a few weeks. True. And we have concrete results to show. Exactly. The children are the best proof that our method works. The two spent the night preparing a presentation for the council, organizing photos, testimonials, and data about the participating children's progress. Meanwhile, in various homes across the city, the children from the project continued working on their articles for the newspaper. They had taken the project very seriously and were producing high-quality content. Emily was at the kitchen table writing her part of the article, Two Perspectives About Music. "Grandma, how can I explain to a hearing person what it's like to feel music through the body?" Margaret thought carefully before answering. "What if you compare it to other things people feel physically, like when they clap their hands at a concert or feel their heart beat faster?" "Good idea. I can say it's as if the whole body turns into one giant ear." "Perfect. It's a comparison anyone can understand." Robert, who was reading the newspaper in the living room, overheard the conversation and came closer. "Can I help with something?" "Daddy, can you read my text and tell me if it makes sense?" Robert read Emily's draft and was impressed by his daughter's clear and deep writing. "Emily, this text is excellent. You managed to explain something very complex in a simple and beautiful way." "Really? Really. Anyone who reads this will understand better how you experience music. And will they stop feeling sorry for me because I can't hear?" "Definitely. They'll realize you're not missing out, just experiencing things differently." Emily's confidence in her own ability to communicate and express herself had grown exponentially. She no longer saw herself as someone limited by deafness, but as someone with a unique and valuable perspective to share. At the Wilsons' house, Olivia and William were working together on the list of questions for the interviews she would conduct. "What if we ask Michael how he got the idea to approach you at that party?" suggested William. "Good one. And for teacher Catherine, can I ask why she believed in the project from the start?" "Excellent question. And for Nathan, I want to ask what it's like to work with something related to your own condition. It must be different from other jobs." William was proud of his daughter's sensitivity. In a few weeks, she had developed a sophisticated understanding of social and human issues. "Olivia, you're asking questions that many professional journalists would ask. I learned that to do a good interview, I need to think about what people really want to know." "And what do people want to know?" "How good changes can start, how an ordinary person can make a difference, how prejudices can be overcome." "Do you think your project answers these questions?" "I think so. It shows that anyone can start something important if they have goodwill and courage." The conversation between father and daughter revealed how the project was impacting not only the participating children, but also their families and communities. The following week, the meeting at the City Education Council took place. Michael and Nathan arrived nervous but prepared. The room was full of educators, public administrators, and representatives from organizations related to inclusive education. "Good afternoon," Michael began. 2 months ago, I was an unemployed street musician. Today I'm here to talk about an experience that could transform inclusive education in our city." He told the story from the beginning. Olivia's party, the meeting with Emily, the reaction of the other children, the development of the project, and the results observed so far. Nathan added his personal perspective. "As a deaf person, I spent my entire childhood and adolescence being seen as someone who needed special help. In this project, for the first time, my experience is valued as professional expertise." The council members asked several technical questions about methodology, measurable results, and the possibility of replication in other schools. Catherine presented preliminary data from the program. "In 6 weeks, we observed a significant improvement in the self-esteem of the participating deaf children. We also documented an increase in interest among hearing children regarding diversity and inclusion issues." "How many schools would be needed to implement this across the entire city system?" asked one council member. "Initially, we could start with 1 school per city region. That would serve approximately 500 children in the first year," replied William. "And what about the costs?" "The initial investment is relatively low. What we mainly need is training for educators and some basic equipment." The presentation was very well received. Several council members expressed interest in officially implementing the program in the city system. "When can we begin a broader pilot project?" asked the council president. "With approval and resources, we could start next semester," replied Catherine. "Let's put this to a vote at the next meeting," he said. "Please prepare a detailed proposal with a timeline and budget." Michael and Nathan left the meeting euphoric. The project was about to become official public policy. "Nathan, do you realize what this means?" Michael said on the way home. "It means our personal experience is going to become an official government program, and that hundreds of children will have opportunities that we didn't have, and that no family will have to go through what our family went through." "Exactly. It's as if we're changing the future." That same week, the children finished writing their articles for the newspaper. The final result exceeded all expectations. They had produced professional quality journalistic content, tackling complex themes with sensitivity and intelligence. Emily and Charlotte's article about the two perspectives of music became the cover story. It was profound, educational, and emotionally touching. Olivia and Mason's report on the project's backstage included exclusive interviews with all the main people involved and a detailed timeline of how it all began. Ethan and Madison created an entertainment section that included innovative games, visual jokes, and even a sign language crossword puzzle. Other pairs contributed articles on adapted sports, assistive technologies, biographies of famous deaf people, and reviews of accessible films. "This newspaper is incredible," said Catherine when she saw the final result. "You've created something that can be used as educational material in schools across the country." "Can we really publish it online?" asked Madison. "Not only can we, but we should," replied Michael. "Other children need to see what you're capable of doing." The newspaper was published online and quickly went viral on education-focused social media. Teachers from various cities began sharing the link, praising the quality of the content and the innovation of the approach. "Michael," Nathan said a few days later, "our newspaper was mentioned on a TV program about inclusive education." "Really? Really? And there's a university in New York wanting to include our project in a book about pedagogical innovations. This is surreal. It's proof that we did something really special. The national recognition of the project brought invitations for lectures, consultations, and even opportunities to expand the program to other states. But for Michael and Nathan, the most important thing remained the direct impact on the lives of the participating children. At the closing party for the pilot program, 2 months after that first meeting, the transformations were evident. Emily had become a natural leader of the group, confident and communicative. Olivia had developed impressive fluency in sign language and had become a vocal advocate for deaf people's rights. Madison had discovered a talent for writing and was already talking about becoming a journalist, specializing in social issues. Mason had learned to play 3 different instruments using adapted techniques. All the children had developed genuine friendships that transcended hearing differences. More importantly, they had become ambassadors for inclusion in their schools and communities. "Children," Michael said at the closing, "do you know you've changed many lives during these 2 months?" "How so?" asked Charlotte. "First, you changed your own lives. You discovered talents, made friends, and gained confidence." "True," agreed Emily. "Second, you changed the lives of your families. Your parents learned about inclusion and became more empathetic people." "My dad now greets every deaf person he meets on the street," said Ethan, laughing. "Third, you changed our school and our community. We now have a more inclusive culture here." "And fourth?" asked Olivia. "Fourth, you inspired other children in other cities. Your newspaper was read by thousands of people." Nathan added, "And fifth, you gave me the best job of my life. For the first time, I wake up every day excited to work." The children applauded in sign language, a tradition they had adopted throughout the program. Robert approached the group of educators. "Michael, Nathan, Catherine, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for Emily and for all these families." "Dr. Robert," Michael replied, "actually, we are the ones who thank you. You gave us the opportunity to discover our calling." "And to prove that ordinary people can do extraordinary things," added Nathan. Margaret was crying with emotion. "Emily, dear, how do you feel now compared to how you felt before the project?" "Grandma, before I thought being deaf was a bad thing that stopped me from having friends. Now I know that being deaf is just a part of who I am and a part that can help other people." "How can it help other people?" "I can teach sign language. I can show different ways of doing things. I can be an example for other deaf children who feel alone." "Do you want to keep doing this?" "I do. When I grow up, I want to work with Michael and Nathan helping other children like they helped me. Emily's answer perfectly summarized the transformative impact of the project. She had gone from an isolated and insecure child to a confident young woman with a sense of purpose and mission. Amanda approached the group. "Margaret, can I apologize one more time?" "Amanda, you've apologized many times. You don't need to anymore." "Yes, I do, because now I completely understand what I did wrong at that party." "What do you understand?" "That by trying to protect my daughter from the discomfort of dealing with differences, I was actually preventing her from growing as a person." "And now?" "Now I see that Olivia has become a more mature, empathetic, and intelligent girl, precisely because she learned to deal with diversity. Children teach us a lot, don't they?" "They do. And they taught me that the fear of difference is much worse than the difference itself." The conversation between the two mothers represented the final reconciliation and the complete transformation of the social dynamic that had begun at that fateful party 2 months earlier. Michael was putting away his instruments when Emily approached him. "Michael, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course." "On the first day you saw me at the party, I was thinking about asking my father to never take me to parties again." "Why?" "Because I was always alone and felt very sad. I thought I would never be able to make friends. And now I can't wait to go to other parties to show all my friends the signs I've learned." Michael was moved by the complete transformation in Emily's perspective. "Emily, do you know that it was you who taught me the importance of what we do?" "How?" "When I saw you alone at that party, I understood that there are many children around the world who need someone to believe in them. And now you believe in all of them?" "I do. And you helped me find a way to show that. So we helped each other." "Exactly. That's how the best friendships work." The closing party continued late into the evening, with performances by the children, testimonials from the parents, and lots of celebration. But what was really being celebrated wasn't the end of the pilot program, but rather the beginning of a new era in the city's inclusive education. A week later, the City Education Council unanimously approved the implementation of the program across the entire city school system. Michael was appointed general coordinator of the project, Nathan became the official accessibility consultant, and Catherine was put in charge of pedagogical supervision. "We'll start with 10 schools next semester," explained the Secretary of Education during the planning meeting. "If the results continue to be positive, we'll expand to the entire system the following year." "How many children will that serve?" asked Michael. "Approximately 800 children in the first year, and potentially 5,000 children when we are operating at full capacity." Nathan was moved by the numbers. 5,000 children who won't have to go through the exclusion that I went through. And 5,000 families who will have support to deal with the challenges of inclusion, added Michael. The project had grown far beyond the most optimistic expectations, but the growth also brought new responsibilities and challenges. "We will need to train dozens of educators," observed Catherine. "How will we ensure that everyone follows the same quality and philosophy?" "We can create a certification program," suggested Nathan, "with theoretical and practical modules, and use the children from the pilot program as assistants and examples," added Michael. "How so?" asked the secretary. "The children who participated in the pilot became experts in inclusive communication. They can help train the new educators and give testimonials to the new participants." The idea was approved enthusiastically. The children from the pilot program would become junior mentors, helping with the implementation of the project in other schools. Emily was the first to accept the invitation. "I want to help other deaf girls feel included like I feel now," she said. Olivia also volunteered immediately. "I want to teach hearing children how to communicate with deaf children like I learned." Within a few days, all 12 children from the pilot program had signed up as volunteer mentors. 3 months later, the first school in the expansion began its activities. Michael, Nathan, and the junior mentors visited the institution on the first day. "Nervous?" Michael asked Emily and Olivia on the way. "A little," replied Emily, "but also excited." "Why?" "Because we are going to help other children discover what we discovered." What did you discover? Differences are opportunities to learn, not problems to avoid, replied Olivia. The first activity at the new school was an absolute success. The veteran children of the project led the activities with impressive naturalness, demonstrating a maturity and leadership that surprised all the adults present. Emily Johnson taught the new deaf participants to feel proud of their unique way of experiencing the world. Olivia showed the hearing children how sign language could be fun and expressive. "How did you learn to do this so well?" asked one of the new educators. "By practicing," replied Madison, "and by always remembering that our mission is to help other children feel included." Mission? Yes. We all have the mission to make the world more inclusive. We start with our schools and families, but the goal is much bigger. Madison's response showed how the children had internalized the project's values and turned them into a life philosophy. By the end of the first semester of the expansion, the results had exceeded all expectations. The 10 participating schools reported significant improvements in the school climate, a reduction in bullying cases, and an increased interest in social issues among the students. More importantly, 200 deaf children had been successfully integrated into regular activities with their hearing peers, and over 600 hearing children had learned at least the basics of sign language. "Michael," said the Secretary of Education during the evaluation meeting, "this project has become a model for other cities. We've already received inquiries from 15 different municipalities. Other places want to implement the program? They do, and the Department of Education has expressed interest in making this a national policy." National policy? Yes, sensory inclusion as an official methodology for schools across the country. Michael Thompson had to sit down. The idea that something that had started with a heartfelt impulse could become national educational policy was overwhelming. Nathan was equally impressed. "Does that mean our personal experience can influence the education of millions of children?" "Exactly that," confirmed the Secretary. "How will we handle something so big?" "Step by step," replied Catherine. "The same way we've handled everything so far, by focusing on the children and keeping our values." The meeting continued for hours, planning the national expansion of the project. But at the end of the day, when Michael returned home, his first concern wasn't the fame or recognition he was receiving. His first concern was a letter he had received from an 8-year-old deaf girl from a small town. "Hi, Michael. My name is Sophia, and I'm deaf like Emily Johnson. My mom read about your project online and told me the story. I also feel alone at school and don't have any friends. Can you come here and teach me how to feel special like you taught Emily Johnson? Sincerely, Sophia." The letter reminded Michael that no matter how big the project became, what really mattered were the individual children who needed help. He showed the letter to Nathan. "What do you think we should do?" "Write back to Sophia, of course, and plan a visit to her town." "Even with everything happening here?" "Especially because of everything happening here. Sophia represents all the children who still need to be reached." "You're right." Michael wrote a heartfelt reply to Sophia, promising he would visit her town soon and that she was not alone. He also attached photos of the project's activities and a special video that Emily Johnson had recorded in sign language, introducing herself and telling how her life had changed. When the letter reached Sophia, she cried with happiness. It was the first time a deaf child like her had made contact, and the first time someone had validated her experiences and feelings. Sophia's mother called Michael the same day. "I don't know how to thank you. Sophia hasn't stopped crying since she received your letter," but they were tears of joy. "How is she feeling?" "Hopeful. For the first time in months, she talked about the future in a positive way." "And how can we help concretely? Can you really come here?" "Yes, we can. We are going to organize a workshop for her school and for other families in the area. That would be a dream." 2 weeks later, Michael, Nathan, Emily, Olivia, and Catherine traveled to Sophia's city. They conducted a 2-day workshop that attracted participants from several nearby cities. Sophia was the first to arrive on the first day, accompanied by her anxious parents. "Are you Sophia?" asked Emily through signs. Sophia nodded timidly. "I'm Emily, the girl from the letter." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. It was the first time a deaf child had spoken directly to her. "Are you real?" asked Sophia. "Of course I'm real, and you are not alone anymore." The meeting between the two girls was emotional for everyone present. Sophia had spent 8 years feeling like the only deaf child in the world, and suddenly she discovered that there were others like her, and that these others were confident, happy, and successful. During the 2 days of the workshop, Sophia transformed completely. From shy and withdrawn, she became participatory and smiling. She became friends with several local hearing children who learned basic signs and showed interest in including her in their games. "How did you do this?" Sophia's mother asked Michael. "I didn't do anything special. I just showed her that she is not alone and that being deaf is not a limitation." But she changed completely in 2 days. She was always like that. She just needed permission to be herself. On the last day of the workshop, Sophia volunteered to demonstrate an activity for the group. She taught a visual dance she had created, combining body movement with facial expression to tell a story. "Sophia," Michael said after the presentation, "you have a natural talent for teaching. Have you ever thought about being an educator when you grow up?" "Can I really do that?" "Of course you can. Look at Emily. She's already helping to train other educators, and she is only 8 years old. Do you think I could help other children like you helped me?" "I'm sure you can." The seed was planted. Sophia became the project's first junior mentor outside the original city. She began visiting schools in the region, sharing her experience and helping other deaf children integrate. 6 months later, Sophia sent a new letter to Michael. "Hi Michael, it's Sophia again. I wanted to tell you that I now have 5 best friends at school and that I am helping 3 other deaf children from the area. One of them lives in a city 200 kilometers from here, but we talk by video every week. Thank you for showing me that being deaf can be something special. Now I also want to change the world like you. With much affection, Sophia, future inclusive educator." Michael kept the letter carefully. It represented much more than a child's gratitude. It represented the continuity and multiplication of the project's impact. Nathan was emotional when he read the letter. "Michael, do you realize that Sophia is going to influence other children who will influence others, who will influence others? Like a positive domino effect." "Exactly. Our project will never stop. Even when we are no longer here to coordinate it. Especially when we are no longer here. The children we are training today will be the educators and leaders of tomorrow." The project's long-term perspective was comforting. They weren't just solving immediate problems, but raising an entire generation of people committed to inclusion and diversity. 1 year after that birthday party that changed everything, a special celebration was held at the school where it all began. It was the project's 1-year anniversary, and all the participating children were invited to a big party. Emily Johnson arrived beaming, accompanied by Robert and Margaret Johnson. She was wearing a T-shirt that said Official Inclusion Monitor and carried a folder with materials she had prepared to teach new activities. "How do you feel 1 year later?" asked Michael Thompson. "Like a completely different person," she replied. "Actually not different. More myself." "What do you mean, more yourself?" "Before I tried to hide that I was deaf because I thought it was a bad thing. Now I use my deafness to help other people. It's like I discovered my superpower." Olivia arrived shortly after, also wearing a monitor's T-shirt and speaking sign language fluently with her younger siblings. "Olivia," said Amanda Wilson, "tell Michael how school is now." "Completely different, Michael. Half the kids in my class know at least the basics of signing. We have 2 new deaf children who have integrated perfectly, and I've become the person everyone comes to when they want to learn about inclusion." "How do you feel about being a reference for this?" "Proud and responsible. I know I need to keep learning so I can teach better." "And your parents, how do they see this transformation?" Amanda answered for herself. "Michael, our whole family has changed. William and I have become volunteers at 2 other inclusion organizations. Olivia taught us that diversity is wealth, not a problem," William Wilson added, "and we discovered that when we help others, we ourselves grow as people." The party continued with presentations by the children, testimonials from the parents, and an exhibition of the work done throughout the year. But the most moving moment was when a special surprise was revealed. Sophia had traveled especially for the party, accompanied by 3 other deaf children from her region who had also become junior monitors. "Emily!" Sophia signed excitedly when she saw her. "Sophia! You came!" The 2 girls hugged like old friends, even though they had only met in person once before. "How are things in your city?" asked Emily. "Amazing. We have the project running in 5 schools now, and look who I brought with me." Sophia introduced her 3 companions, 9-year-old Ava, 7-year-old Charlie, and 10-year-old Julia. They had all become inclusion leaders in their respective schools. "We created a network," explained Charlie. "Every week we have a video meeting to exchange ideas and plan activities." "A network of what?" asked Michael, intrigued. "A network of deaf children who help other deaf children," replied Julia. "There are already 15 of us in 8 cities. And the goal is to reach 100 children in 50 cities, added Ava. Michael was impressed. The children had spontaneously created an informal organization that multiplied the project's impact far beyond what any official planning could achieve. "Did you do this by yourselves?" "Not entirely by ourselves," answered Sophia. "With help from our families and schools, but the idea was ours." "And does it work?" "Very well. Each of us is responsible for helping deaf children in our area. When we encounter a difficult situation, we ask the others for help through the group. Nathan was moved to see how the children had taken ownership of the project and turned it into something even bigger. "Girls, do you know you've created something unprecedented?" "What do you mean?" "A national support network among deaf children, organized by the children themselves. This doesn't exist anywhere else in the world." "Really?" "Really. You are pioneers." The discovery that the children had created a unique worldwide innovation was the highlight of the party. Michael realized the project had evolved far beyond his capacity to control or plan it. It had taken on a life of its own in the hands of the children it was initially meant to help. "Michael," said Catherine during the party, "do you realize you're no longer the coordinator of this project?" "What do you mean?" "The children have taken the lead. You've become a facilitator, but they are the true protagonists now. Is that good or bad?" "It's perfect. It means the project has become sustainable and independent. Even if you stopped working on it tomorrow, it would keep going." "And will I stop?" "You don't have to stop, but you can evolve into a different role, perhaps coordinating the national expansion or developing new programs." The prospect of professional evolution excited Michael. He had discovered that his true calling was to create opportunities for other people to shine, especially children who were underestimated by society. At the end of the party, a special symbolic moment happened. All the children present, deaf and hearing, veterans and new participants, gathered in a large circle. "Let's make a promise together," suggested Emily. "What kind of promise?" asked one of the younger children. "A promise that we will never let any child feel alone or excluded for being different." "How will we do that?" "By always including, always teaching, and never giving up on anyone." "Even when we're adults?" "Especially when we're adults," answered Olivia, "because then we'll have even more power to make a difference." All the children made the promise in unison, some speaking, others signing, creating a moment of unity that moved all the adults present. Robert watched Emily with infinite pride. "Margaret," he said to his mother, "can you believe this is the same girl who was alone in the corner of that party a year ago?" "I believe it perfectly," she answered, smiling. "She was always this person. She just needed an opportunity to show it. And now? Now she's going to spend her whole life creating opportunities for other children to show who they really are. How can you be so sure?" "Because I saw it in her eyes when she made that promise. It wasn't a child's promise. It was a lifelong commitment." Margaret was right. The experience had transformed Emily not just into a more confident child, but into a future social leader, with a clear sense of mission. When the party ended and the family started saying goodbye, Michael had a few minutes alone to reflect on everything that had happened. 1 year earlier, he was a street musician struggling to survive. Now he was the national coordinator of a project impacting thousands of children, had professional recognition, and most importantly, had discovered the meaning of his life. But not everything had been easy during this year. There were moments of doubt, unexpected challenges, and obstacles that almost made the project collapse. Michael remembered especially a difficult period that had happened 6 months ago. A new principal had taken over one of the schools participating in the project. She didn't believe in the inclusive methodology and started creating obstacles for the activities. She argued that the program disrupted the regular class schedule and that the results didn't justify the investment. "Mr. Michael," she had said during a tense meeting, "we need to be realistic. These deaf children will never fully integrate. It's better to concentrate resources on programs that benefit the majority." The principal's words had made Michael furious, but he knew that confronting her directly wouldn't solve anything. It was then that Nathan suggested a different strategy. "What if we let the children speak for themselves?" He had proposed. "What do you mean?" "Organize a presentation where the parents, the principal, and other educators can see the project's results directly." The idea resulted in one of the most moving mornings in the program's history. 12 children from the school in question prepared a complete presentation about everything they had learned. Emily, who had traveled especially to support her colleagues, opened the presentation with a speech in sign language, simultaneously translated by Olivia. "My name is Emily Johnson. A year ago, I was a girl who hid in the corner at parties because no one wanted to play with me. Today, I'm an inclusion monitor, and I help children from all over the country discover that being different is being special." The principal, who had arrived prepared to shut down the program, was clearly touched by the testimony. The children continued with presentations that demonstrated not only their skills in bilingual communication, but also significant academic improvements. A 9-year-old deaf girl named Rachel presented a science project she had developed, communicating fluently both in signs and through visual posters. "How did you manage to create such a complete project?" asked the principal. "With help from my hearing friends and my deaf friends," Rachel answered. "Each one contributed with their different skills. And do you think you could have done this alone?" "No. I learned that working together with different people makes me smarter." Rachel's answer perfectly summarized the project's philosophy: diversity as a source of mutual enrichment, not as an obstacle to be overcome. An 8-year-old hearing boy named Ryan explained how learning sign language had improved his grades in all subjects. "How is that possible?" asked one of the teachers. "When you learn to communicate with your hands, you develop more visual attention. That helped me pay more attention to details in everything." "And did it improve your concentration?" "A lot. Now I can concentrate better because I learned that there are different ways to absorb information." The children's testimonies were supported by concrete data presented by Catherine. The average grades of all participating children had improved, bullying cases at the school had decreased drastically, and school attendance had increased for both deaf and hearing children. "Principal," said a mother present at the meeting, "my daughter has never liked coming to school as much as she does now." "Why?" asked the principal. "Because she feels useful helping other children, and she feels special for knowing things that not everyone knows." "Like sign language?" "Like sign language, like visual communication, like teamwork with different people. These are skills that will be useful for the rest of her life." The presentation ended with a surprise that no one expected. The children had prepared a special gift for the principal, a small handmade book containing drawings and texts about what the project meant to each of them. The principal flipped through the book in silence, reading testimonies like, "Before I was afraid to talk to deaf people because I didn't know how. Now they are my best friends. Ava, 8 years old. I discovered that being deaf doesn't stop me from teaching important things to other people. Emma, 9 years old. I learned that when we include everyone, everyone becomes happier. Jacob Peter, 7 years old. When she finished reading, the principal was visibly moved. "Children," she finally said, "you taught me something very important today." "What?" asked several voices. "That I was measuring the project's value by the wrong things. I was only looking at numbers and schedules when I should have been looking at you." "And now?" asked Rachel. Now the project will continue. And I will strive to be a better principal for all the children in the school. The principal not only kept the program, but became one of its biggest advocates. She implemented other inclusion initiatives in the school and started attending educational conferences to talk about the benefits of diversity in the classroom. This episode had taught Michael an important lesson. The project was stronger when the children themselves were its spokespeople. They had an authenticity and sincerity that no technical argument could overcome. Another challenging moment had happened when a deaf family opposed the program, arguing that mixing deaf and hearing children could harm the development of deaf identity in the children. Our children need to learn to be proud of being deaf, argued the father, who was also deaf, during a community meeting. Mixing with hearing people might make them think they need to become hearing to be accepted. The concern was valid and had divided opinions in the local deaf community. Nathan was tasked with mediating the situation, since his perspective as a deaf person was fundamental. I understand the concern, Nathan had replied. I myself spent years trying to appear hearing because I thought it would be better. And now I work proudly as a deaf consultant. My deafness isn't something I hide or overcome. It's my professional qualification. How does the project help with that? It teaches deaf children that their way of communicating is valuable and interesting. Instead of them always being the ones to adapt, here the hearing children also learn their language. Nathan had suggested a modification to the program, include specific modules about deaf culture, the history of the deaf community, and the celebration of deaf identity. We want deaf children to feel proud of being deaf, he explained, and we want hearing children to learn to respect and admire deaf culture. The modification was successfully implemented. The deaf children in the program began learning about famous deaf personalities, achievements of the deaf community, and the cultural richness of sign language. Emily became especially interested in this part of the program. "Daddy," she said to Robert one day, "did you know there are famous deaf poets? I didn't know. How does poetry work in sign language? It's so beautiful. They use hand movements, facial expressions, and their whole body to create art. Would you like to learn that?" "I would. Maybe I can create poems and present them to the other children." Robert was moved to see his daughter discovering forms of artistic expression related to her own culture. It was the complete opposite of the shy and embarrassed girl from a year ago. Emily began dedicating herself to visual poetry, creating presentations that combined signs, body movement, and facial expression to tell stories. Her creations became popular not only among the children in the project, but also among educators who used them as an example of the richness of deaf culture. During this period, Emily also developed a special friendship with a 70-year-old lady named Hope Robinson, who had been deaf since birth and had become a sort of mentor for the children in the project. "Grandma Hope," Emily asked during a visit, "what was it like being deaf when you were a child?" "Very difficult, dear. There were no schools that accepted deaf children. There were no interpreters. People thought deaf people couldn't learn." "How did you learn then?" "My mother taught me at home. She made up her own signs because she didn't know any official sign language." "And when did you discover that there was a real sign language?" "When I was 17, when I met other deaf young people. It was like discovering I wasn't alone in the world. That's how I felt when I met other deaf kids in the project." "Exactly. The difference is you discovered this at 8 years old. It took me 17 years to understand that being deaf didn't mean being alone. The conversations with Hope greatly enriched Emily's perspective on her own condition. She began to understand that she was part of a community with its own history, traditions, and achievements. Inspired by these discoveries, Emily decided to create a personal project, documenting the stories of elderly deaf people in the community. She wanted to preserve these experiences and share them with other deaf children. With help from Olivia, who became her assistant and videographer, Emily interviewed 15 deaf people over 60, collecting stories about their childhoods, challenges, achievements, and advice for younger generations. The project resulted in a 30-minute documentary that was shown in schools, community centers, and even at a national conference on disability rights. Emily, said Michael after the documentary's first public screening. "Do you realize you've become a documentary filmmaker at 9 years old? What's a documentary filmmaker? Someone who tells important real-life stories through videos. So, I can do that when I grow up." "You can do that for the rest of your life if you want." "I want to. There are so many important stories that need to be told." Emily's evolution from an excluded child to a young activist and communicator demonstrated the project's transformative potential. But she wasn't the only one who had grown in surprising ways. Olivia had developed a fluency in sign language equivalent to that of many adults and had begun working as a volunteer interpreter at community events. At 9 years old, she was already helping families who received a diagnosis of deafness for their children, offering practical and emotional support. "Mom," she said to Amanda one day, "can I take an official interpreter course when I grow up?" "Of course you can. But why do you want to do that?" "Because I want to help deaf people communicate with the hearing world, and hearing people communicate with the deaf world. It's a beautiful profession. And a necessary one. There are still many places that don't have interpreters." Amanda was proud of the maturity and social awareness her daughter had developed. The girl who a year ago avoided interaction with Emily now dedicated hours each week to inclusion activities. Ethan had discovered a talent for creating inclusive games and activities. His inventions were used in several schools in the program, always with the goal of allowing equal participation by deaf and hearing children. "Uncle Michael," he said during one of the meetings, "I invented a new game. How does it work?" "It's like detective, but half the clues are visual and half are audio. That way everyone needs to work together to solve the mystery." "Brilliant. Have you tested it?" "I tested it with my class. It worked super well. The deaf kids were better at the visual clues and the hearing kids were better at the audio clues. And together? Together, they were unbeatable." Ethan's games became popular in several schools and were included in the project's official activity manual. He also began receiving requests from other cities interested in implementing his creations. Madison had specialized in written communication and become the editor-in-chief of the project's monthly newspaper. Her articles were read by children and adults across the country, and she was already receiving invitations to write for other publications. "Madison," said Catherine during a meeting, "your articles are being cited in academic papers about inclusive education." "Really? Really? University professors are using your texts as examples of effective communication between children. Does that mean I'm helping other teachers better understand how to work with deaf children?" "Exactly. That's awesome. Can I write even more?" Madison's dedication inspired other children in the project to dedicate themselves to written communication. Soon there was a small group of young journalists documenting and promoting the program's activities across different media. Mason had become an expert in assistive technology, discovering and testing apps, equipment, and resources that facilitated communication between deaf and hearing people. "Look at this app I found," he showed Nathan. "It translates speech to text in real time." "How does it work?" "The hearing person speaks into the phone, and the deaf person reads what they said on the screen instantly." "And does it work well?" "It works. I tested it with my family. Now I can talk to people who don't know sign language. That is a very useful tool, and there's another one that translates signs to speech. The deaf person makes signs in front of the camera, and the app speaks out loud." Mason began creating tutorials on assistive technology, teaching other families how to use digital resources to improve communication. His explanatory videos became a national reference on the subject. Each child in the project had found their own unique way to contribute to the cause of inclusion, developing talents and passions they probably would never have discovered in a traditional educational environment. The parents had also undergone significant transformations. Robert had become a frequent speaker at medical events, educating healthcare professionals on how to approach families who receive a diagnosis of deafness for their children. "Colleagues," he said during a pediatric conference, "when you communicate a diagnosis of deafness, you are not communicating a tragedy. You are communicating a difference that requires proper support." "How should we approach these families?" asked a doctor from the audience. with practical information, realistic hope, and contacts for support resources. Deafness does not prevent a child from having a full and happy life. And when the parents become desperate, connect them with other families who have been through the same situation. Show them examples of successful, socially integrated deaf children. Robert often brought Emily to these lectures, where she demonstrated her skills and talked with families who were facing the same process they had gone through years ago. "Dr. Robert," said a mother after one of these presentations, "how did you manage to make Emily so confident?" "By giving her opportunities to show what she's capable of, instead of protecting her from every challenge." "But what if she faces rejection?" "She will sometimes. We all face rejection. But she will also find acceptance, friendship, and opportunities for growth." "How do we know when it's the right time to expose children to social situations?" "When they show interest and when we have adequate support networks." The project we participated in was crucial for creating that network. Robert's lectures helped hundreds of families cope better with the diagnosis of deafness, reducing social isolation and increasing expectations for their children's future. Margaret had become a sort of informal counselor for grandparents of deaf children. She organized monthly meetings where grandparents shared experiences, doubts, and support strategies. "Mrs. Margaret," said a grandmother during one of these meetings, "how did you manage to keep hope during the difficult years?" "By remembering every day that Emily was so much more than her deafness. She was always intelligent, affectionate, and determined. The deafness was just one detail. But it must have been hard to see her excluded. It was devastating at times, but I knew that one day someone would see in her what I always saw. And what if that day had never come? It would eventually arrive. Maybe it would take longer. Maybe it would happen differently. But it would arrive." Special needs children always find their way when they have love and support at home. The support groups organized by Margaret spread to other cities, creating a national network of grandmothers engaged in the cause of inclusion. Amanda had become a volunteer for several disability rights organizations, channeling the guilt she felt about her initial attitude into positive actions. "William," she said to her husband, "I want to take an official sign language course." "Why?" "So I can help other families like ours was helped." "What kind of help?" "I want to become a volunteer interpreter in hospitals, schools, and community events." "That will take up a lot of your time." "I want it to. I need to give back everything we've learned." William completely supported his wife's decision. He had also started participating in inclusion initiatives at his company, proposing more diverse hiring policies and more accessible work environments. "Now, boss," he said during an executive meeting, "our company could hire deaf people for various roles. Wouldn't that complicate communication? No more complicated than hiring people who speak other languages. And there are technological resources that make it much easier. Do you know any qualified candidates?" "I do, and I can connect our company with organizations that handle this matching." William's initiative resulted in the hiring of 5 deaf people at his company, creating a more diverse and enriching work environment for everyone. Catherine had been promoted to Deputy Secretary of Inclusive Education, coordinating the implementation of the project at the state level. She worked directly with Michael and Nathan on developing more comprehensive educational policies. "Michael," she said during a planning meeting, "we've received a proposal from the Department of Education to expand nationally." "Nationally how?" "Mandatory implementation of inclusive sensory education programs in all public schools across the country." "That's huge." "It's historic. It would be the first national educational policy created from a local community experience." "Are we prepared for something this big?" "With the train-the-trainer system we developed, yes. We have trained children, youth, and adults spread across 15 states. Are the children okay with this responsibility?" "They are eager for it. Emily has already asked me 3 times when they'll get to train educators from other countries." Emily's international ambition represented well the growth of the project's aspirations. They were no longer content with just impacting their local community. They wanted to influence global inclusion policies. Nathan had been invited to join an international commission on the rights of deaf people at the United Nations organization. At 25, he would be the youngest deaf consultant in the organization's history. "Michael," he said when he received the invitation, "I'm scared." "Why?" "I will represent not just the United States, but all deaf children who are still fighting for inclusion worldwide. It's a big responsibility. Huge. And what if I don't do a good job?" "You will do an excellent job. You understand these issues better than any academic expert." "How can you be sure?" "Because you've lived through it all. Your authority comes from experience, not from theories." Nathan accepted the invitation and began preparing to represent the United States in international discussions on inclusive education. It was the definitive recognition that the local experience had generated globally relevant expertise. Michael had received invitations to teach at 3 different universities, but chose to continue working directly with the children. For him, direct contact with the project's beneficiaries was essential to maintain the work's authenticity and effectiveness. "Why don't you accept the academic proposals?" asked Robert during a lunch. "Because I don't want to lose sight of the reason why all this started." "What reason?" "Children like Emily, who need someone willing to get close to them and believe in the potential they have." "But you could train hundreds of professionals at universities." "I can train thousands of children in schools, and they will train other thousands." "What's the difference?" "The children won't forget why they do this. They'll carry the mission in their hearts, not just on their resumes." Michael had made the conscious decision to stay close to the grassroots of the movement, believing this would ensure the continuity of the project's core values. 2 years after that transformative party, an unexpected event took place. Emily, now 10 years old, received an official invitation to speak at the opening of the International Congress on Inclusive Education in Washington, D.C. "Daddy," she said when she learned of the invitation, "are they really going to let a child speak to all those important adults?" "They are. You have important things to say." "About what?" "About what it's like to grow up deaf in a world that is learning to include, instead of growing up deaf in a world that excludes." "Is that important?" "It's the most important thing anyone can say at that Congress." Emily spent weeks preparing for the speech with help from Olivia, who would be her official interpreter, and Nathan, who coached her on how to address adult audiences. Said Nathan during one of the rehearsals, "remember that you're not there to impress anyone." "Then what am I there for?" "To tell your story, to show that deaf children can be protagonists, not just beneficiaries of educational policies." "What if I get nervous?" "If you got nervous, it would be normal, but you won't. You'll be doing what you were born to do." "What's that?" "To inspire other people to believe in the potential of children who are different." The day of the Congress arrived, and Emily took the stage with impressive confidence for a 10-year-old. She was elegantly dressed, but maintained the genuine, spontaneous smile that characterized her. "Good morning," she began, speaking and signing simultaneously. "My name is Emily Johnson. I am 10 years old, and I am deaf." The audience of 1,000 international educators immediately became attentive. 3 years ago, I was a girl who hid in corners at parties because no one wanted to play with me. Today, I am here speaking to you about how to transform education." She told her story with moving details, but without self-pity. She described the loneliness, the exclusion, the first meeting with Michael, the first friendships, the development of leadership, and her current mission to help other children. "You might be thinking my story is special because it had a happy ending," she said. "But it's not my story that's special. It's the attitude of the people around me that changed." The audience was visibly moved. When adults decide to believe in the potential of different children, magical things happen. When children get opportunities to show their talents, they surprise everyone. And when entire communities embrace diversity as a strength, everyone wins. Emily concluded her speech with a direct challenge to the audience. "When you return to your countries, you will find children like me in your schools. Some will be hiding in corners. Others will be overprotected by their families. Others will be underestimated by their teachers. My request is simple. Get close to these children, believe in them. Give them opportunities to show what they are capable of. And most importantly, teach other children that differences are opportunities to learn new things, not problems to avoid. If you do this, you won't just change the lives of a few special children. You will create an entire generation that is more inclusive, more empathetic, and better prepared to live in a diverse world. The speech ended with a 5-minute standing ovation. Several educators were crying, and many approached her afterward to ask for details about how to implement similar programs in their countries. "Emily," said an educator from Finland, "could you visit our country to help train our teachers?" "Of course, but it has to be together with my deaf and hearing friends because the project only works when everyone participates together." "How old did you say you are again?" 10 years old. "Why?" "Because you speak like an experienced international consultant." "Oh," laughed Emily, "that's because I learned that age doesn't matter when you have an important mission to fulfill." Emily's spontaneous response perfectly summarized her transformation. The shy girl had become a natural leader, aware of her role and prepared for responsibilities far beyond her years. Emily's speech was recorded and went viral on educational social media. Within a week, it had been translated into 15 languages and shared by inclusive education organizations worldwide. Michael watched the speech from the audience, next to Nathan, Robert, Margaret, Amanda, Olivia, and all the other children from the original project who had traveled to Washington, D.C. to support Emily. "Nathan," he whispered during the ovation, "do you realize what we just witnessed? A 10-year-old child changing international educational policies. It's surreal. It's proof that it was all worth it." When Emily came down from the stage, she was immediately surrounded by family and friends, but the first person she looked for was Michael. "Uncle Michael," she said, using the affectionate term she had adopted. "Did I do it?" "Did you do what, Em?" "Show the whole world that deaf children can do amazing things when they get opportunities. You did much more than that. You inspired thousands of educators to rethink their practices. And now we go home to keep doing what we've always done. One child at a time, one school at a time, one community at a time. Are we really going to keep doing that, even after everything that happened? Especially after everything that happened. Success shouldn't pull us away from our original mission." Emily hugged Michael tightly. "Thank you for approaching me at that party. Thank you for teaching me that music isn't just sound, but a connection between people. We make quite a team, don't we?" "The best team in the world," Michael replied, smiling. On the flight back home, all the children from the project were talking excitedly about future plans. They had received invitations from 8 different countries, and an international training tour was being organized. "Guys," said Madison, "do you realize we're going to travel the world teaching adults?" "It's kind of weird when you say it like that," answered Ethan. "Why?" "Because we're just doing what we've always done, including everyone in the fun." "True," agreed Mason. "Except now the fun has become official educational methods." "And we've become international consultants," added Olivia, laughing. "Junior consultants," corrected Emily. "We must never forget that we are children doing children's work." "What is children's work?" asked one of the younger girls. "To include everyone, teach adults to be less prejudiced, and show that differences make the world more interesting." Emily's answer provoked general laughter, but it also perfectly summarized the philosophy that had guided the project from the beginning. 3 years after the party that changed everything, Michael was in his office organizing program reports when he received a special call. "Michael, this is Sophia, the girl you met back in my hometown." "Sophia, how are you?" "Great. Actually, I'm calling to share some amazing news." "What is it?" "I'm going to study in Washington, D.C. I won a scholarship to attend high school at the best deaf school in the country." "Sophia, that's fantastic. And you know what else? Emily is going to study there too. We're going to be classmates." "How come?" "Her parents decided she needs a more academically challenging environment. And the school offered her a scholarship too because of the work she does." Michael was moved. Seeing that the girls were achieving high-quality educational opportunities was confirmation that the project had fulfilled its most ambitious goals. "And will you keep working on inclusion even while studying in Washington, D.C.? "Of course. The school wants us to develop an exchange program between deaf schools and mainstream schools. Did you accept?" "We accepted right away. It's the chance to take our project to the official national level." Sophia, you know you're still kids, right? We know, she laughed. Kids who changed the world a little bit. The conversation with Sophia confirmed for Michael that the project had achieved its goal of forming young leaders capable of continuing the work, even when the founders were no longer present. Nathan had accepted the position at the UN and was moving to New York the following month. His mission would be to coordinate global inclusive education policies based on the American experience. Michael, he said during his farewell party, I never imagined our difficult childhood would result in this. In what? In me representing deaf children from all over the world in an international organization. And in me coordinating national educational policies. Who would have thought? But you know what makes me proudest? What? That we managed to do all this without losing focus on the children. We didn't become distant bureaucrats or academics. True, we still know by name every child who enters the program, and we still get emotional with every little achievement of theirs. That is our greatest professional qualification, remembering why we started. Nathan's farewell was emotional, but not sad. Everyone knew he was leaving to expand the impact of the work they had developed together globally. Emily organized a special presentation to say goodbye to Uncle Nathan. She created a poetic video in sign language, telling the story of the project from the perspective of the participating children. Uncle Nathan, she said at the end of the presentation, thank you for teaching me that being deaf means having a special perspective on the world, not having a limitation. Emily, thank you for teaching me that difficult experiences can turn into tools to help other people. Will we see each other in New York? Of course. When you go on the international tour, I'll organize a special presentation at the UN headquarters. Promise? I promise. The hug between Emily and Nathan symbolized the continuity of the project despite the changes happening. The personal relationships created during the program's development would ensure its emotional sustainability beyond the institutional structure. Michael continued coordinating the national program, but he also started writing a book about the experience. He wanted to document not only the methodologies developed, but especially the personal transformations he had witnessed. Why a book? Catherine asked during a meeting. Because there are millions of children around the world in the same situation Emily was in 3 years ago. And the book will reach them? It will reach the adults who interact with them, parents, teachers, neighbors, family members. What will the main message be? That any ordinary person can make a difference in the life of a child who is different. It just takes courage to reach out and believe in the potential they have. Title: The Girl Who Listened with Her Heart, How a Deaf Child Transformed a Community. The book was published 2 years later and became an international bestseller, translated into 23 languages. The copyright royalties were entirely donated to a fund that financed inclusion programs in underprivileged communities. More important than the commercial success, the book inspired thousands of similar initiatives around the world. Michael began receiving messages from readers telling him about inclusion projects they had created in their own communities. One message in particular moved him deeply. Dear Michael, I am a teacher in the Netherlands and I read your book. I identified a girl in my school who was in the same situation as Emily. I reached out to her like you did, and today she is the leader of the school's theatre group. The project expanded, and now we have children with different special needs participating together. Thank you for teaching me that inclusion is not a favor, it's a discovery. Best regards, Ellen. Messages like this arrived daily, confirming that the project's impact had transcended geographical and cultural borders. On the 5th anniversary of the party that changed everything, a special celebration was organized at the school where it all began. All the children from the original project were invited, along with their families and the educators involved. Emily, now 13, had become an articulate and confident teenager, but maintained the sweetness and spontaneity that had always characterized her. Uncle Michael, she said during the party, do you remember when you asked me if I liked music that first time? I remember perfectly. Now I know the right answer. What is it? I don't like music. I love music. Not the music that enters through the ears, but the music that connects people. And what kind of music is that? The music of friendship, of inclusion, of believing in people's potential. That music I hear perfectly. With your heart, with my heart, with my soul, with my whole life. Michael was moved by the answer. Emily had found a poetic and profound way to express her unique relationship with the world of sound. Olivia, also 13, had developed fluency in 5 different sign languages and was already considered one of the most talented young interpreters in the country. Liv, asked Michael, what was the biggest discovery you made in these 5 years? That I didn't learn sign language to help Emily. No? No. I learned because it made me a more complete person. Emily helped me discover talents I didn't even know I had. How so? She taught me that communication goes far beyond words. She taught me to pay attention to gestures, expressions, people's energy. And did that change how you relate to everyone? Completely. Now I can connect better even with people who speak the same language as me. Olivia's reflection showed how the project had enriched not only the deaf children, but all the participants. During the party, a special video produced by the children themselves was shown, documenting the 5-year evolution of the project. The video included testimonials from participants, families, educators, and people who had been indirectly impacted. One of the most emotional parts showed dozens of deaf children from various cities, telling how their lives had changed after learning about the work of Emily and her friends. Before I thought being deaf was a curse, said an 11-year-old girl from Miami. Now I know it's a superpower. My parents stopped feeling sorry for me when they saw Emily's video at the Congress, recounted a 9-year-old boy from Texas. Now they believe I can do anything. At my school, all children know at least the basics of sign language, reported a 10-year-old girl from Chicago. I'm not the only different one anymore. I'm just one of the many interesting kids in the class. The testimonials confirmed that the project had reached a real national scale, transforming the experience of thousands of deaf children across the country. At the end of the party, Emily gave a special speech to everyone present. 5 years ago, I was an 8-year-old girl who thought I would never have friends. Today, I have friends in dozens of countries. I work with international educators, and I help other children discover that being different is being special. But do you know what the biggest change in my life was? The audience fell silent, waiting for the answer. The biggest change was discovering that I didn't change. I was always smart, caring, creative, and determined. What changed was that the people around me learned to see these qualities. That's why my message to all the different children who might be watching, you don't need to change. You are perfect just the way you are. What needs to change is the world around you. And for the adults, don't feel sorry for children who are different. Be curious. Approach them. Believe in their potential. You will discover that they have much more to teach than to learn. Together we can create a world where no child feels excluded for being different, a world where diversity is celebrated as a richness, not feared as a problem. This is the world we are building, one child at a time, one school at a time, one community at a time. Emily's speech was followed by an emotional ovation from everyone present. Even at 13, she demonstrated a maturity and leadership that impressed any adult. Michael watched the scene with infinite pride. The shy girl he had found hiding in the corner of a party had become an inspiring leader, capable of articulating transformative visions about social inclusion. Nathan, he said on the phone that night, telling him about the party, you missed something incredible. Tell me everything. Emily gave a speech that moved everyone. She talked about how she didn't need to change to be accepted, but how the world around her learned to see her qualities. That sums it all up, doesn't it? Exactly. The project was never about changing children who are different. It was always about changing how society relates to them. And did we succeed? We achieved much more than we imagined. Emily is now an international voice for inclusion, but without losing the childlike essence she always had. Michael, do you realize we changed the world? I think the world changed us too. We found our life's purpose by doing something that came from the heart. The conversation with Nathan perfectly summarized the journey they had taken. Two brothers facing personal difficulties had found in other people's cause the key to their own fulfillment. Today, 7 years after that transformative party, Emily is 15 years old and studies at one of the best schools in Washington, D.C. She maintains perfect fluency in sign language, developed exceptional skills in written communication, and speaks 3 languages through lip reading. More importantly, she has become one of the most recognized young human rights activists in the country. Her speeches are watched by millions of people, her articles are published in international magazines, and her story inspires inclusion projects in dozens of countries. But when asked about her achievements, Emily always answers, "My greatest achievement was not becoming famous or recognized. It was discovering that I can help other children feel included like I feel today." Olivia is also 15 and has become the youngest certified interpreter in the country. She works part-time at official events and dedicates the rest of her time to training other young interpreters. Her friendship with Emily Johnson continues to be one of the most solid and inspiring ever documented. They communicate daily, work together on inclusion projects, and plan to attend university in the same city. Michael Thompson continues to coordinate inclusive education programs, but on a national scale. He travels across the country implementing methodologies based on the original experience, always accompanied by young mentors who were trained by the project. His book has become an international reference in inclusive education and has been adopted as required reading in pedagogy courses at several universities. Nathan works at the UN as a senior consultant on deaf rights. He coordinates policies that impact the lives of millions of people in 50 different countries. Despite the physical distance, he maintains constant contact with the original project and regularly returns to the United States to participate in special activities. Robert Johnson continues to work as a cardiologist, but has also become a speaker specialized in medical communication with families of children with special needs. His lectures have changed how healthcare professionals approach diagnoses related to disability. Margaret Johnson, at 75 years old, is considered one of the leading senior activists for deaf rights. She coordinates support groups for families in 5 states and regularly receives awards for her social contribution. Amanda Wilson became an official ASL interpreter and works in hospitals, schools, and government events. She completely transformed her perspective on diversity and is now one of the most articulate advocates for inclusion policies. William Wilson implemented diversity programs at the company where he works and became a business consultant specialized in inclusive work environments. Catherine Davis was appointed National Secretary of Inclusive Education and coordinates the implementation of educational policies based on the project's experience across the entire national territory. Every person involved in the original story found ways to continue the values and lessons developed during those first transformative years. But the most significant impact is perhaps the least visible, the hundreds of thousands of children who grew up in more inclusive environments, the families who received adequate support when facing diagnoses of special needs, the educators who rethought their teaching practices, and the communities that learned to celebrate diversity instead of fearing it. The project that began with a street musician approaching a lone deaf girl at a party has transformed into a social movement that influences educational policies in dozens of countries. But for Emily Johnson, Olivia, Michael Thompson, and all the other protagonists of the story, the most important thing remains what it has always been, ensuring that no child feels excluded or underestimated for being different. End of story. What an incredible journey we have followed together, from a children's party where a deaf girl was ignored to an international inclusion movement that transforms lives. Now we want to know, what did you think of Emily Johnson's transformation? Which moment moved you the most? Leave a comment telling us which part of the story touched your heart the most and share it with someone who needs to hear this message of hope and inclusion.